Our story begins with a revolution in the world of gaming. A technology company created a device for virtual reality, or REAPL for short. This device is designed for those who are tired of boring games on their phones, or monotonous MMORPGs on computers. It is even for those whose relationships are going through a difficult period and are long distance. REAPL can fix all that. Thanks to this device, anyone can become a great warrior in a fantasy world, or arrange a date with the loved one they have been dreaming of for so long. The main advantage of REAPL was that everything felt the same as in reality. Complete immersion. To promote its product, the company chose the most famous blogger in the world, Pink. In general, this device was a revolution in the world of gaming, and thanks to clever advertising, it attracted millions of gamers. Within just a few hours of its release, REAPL had been purchased by over 1 million people. All possible game studios began to produce exclusively virtual reality games. But believe me, not everyone liked these changes. This guy's name is Eric. He's an ordinary Korean teenager who recently became a high school senior. In his eyes, the world has changed dramatically in the 2 years since the release of REAPL, Generations, in which all people, regardless of gender and age, play this game. They even play it in cafes. And in this world, Eric is an outsider. Unlike all his peers, he has never played virtual reality games. And of course, because of this, he had a very difficult time at school. All his classmates did was discuss virtual reality news all day long. For example, these girls are discussing yesterday's raid in the dungeon and bragging about their awards. And these guys are discussing the recent competition in the game, The Hell. By the way, one of them took the lead in the challenge by killing the main boss. Mark was considered the coolest guy in class because of his achievements in games. The other guys just admire him. They even gave him a nickname, Lord. Suddenly, everyone in the class fell silent. Eric walked into the classroom. Everyone knew that our hero hated virtual reality and everything related to it. When you're not like everyone else, you're usually bullied. Over the years of school, Eric learned one rule. The less noticeable you are, the less they bother you. But unfortunately, this doesn't always work. Noticing the huge bruises under our hero's eyes, the girls said, "Hey, maybe you should just dig a hole for yourself." Not wanting to get into more trouble, the guy ignored their words. School was hell for him, not because of the insults, but because everyone was talking about that damn REAPL. Suddenly, Mark approached Eric. "Hi, I understand you didn't have breakfast today." "As usual," the guy asked with a pleasant smile. "Yeah, I didn't feel like it," our hero replied in a whisper. "We need to talk. Shall we go outside?" Mark added with a wink. So that no one could hear their conversation, the guys climbed onto the roof. Unlike everyone else, Mark didn't make fun of Eric, but instead took care of him. He often shared his food with our hero. To some extent, they could be called friends. Left alone, the guy asked, "Why do you hate REAPL so much?" But all he heard in response was silence. "Listen, being friends with other kids in your class is part of school life. If you don't have any money, maybe I can lend you my REAPL," Mark asked anxiously. "Thanks, but no thanks," our hero replied indifferently. "As you wish. But here's some friendly advice. Clean yourself up, you look terrible. Since we're alone, maybe you could trust me just this once and play," Mark added, getting hit in the face with a paper package. "We've discussed this many times, and I talked about it at the beginning of high school." "No, I won't touch it," Eric replied in a scary and confident voice. That was the end of their conversation. After school, our hero returned to his empty and dirty apartment. Chip and instant noodle wrappers were scattered everywhere. Our hero was sincerely grateful to Mark for his concern. But despite this, he couldn't tell him the real reason why he hated REAPL. Even at home, Eric felt like a stranger. On YouTube, all the videos were about virtual reality games. The same was true of the news, as if all the maniacs and murderers had disappeared. Even cooking forums were filled with discussions about the new version of REAPL. Wherever Eric went, it was the same thing. But why did he hate all these games so much? You might think he doesn't have enough money. And in part that's true, but that's not the main reason. It's all about his past. REAPL took away his dream and his future. Let's go back 2 years before the advent of virtual reality games. Everyone in the world plays classic games on computers, consoles, and phones. In short, the world is as we know it. And among all the gamers, only one stood out. One frame. Let's go back even further into the past, to Eric's childhood. His parents were different from others. They praised him for his success in games. They supported him when he dreamed of pursuing this career. They believed in him even more than he believed in himself. His mom and dad became the driving force that made him work hard at it no matter what. However, everything changed when both parents died in a terrible accident. On that day, Eric became an orphan, and his whole world was destroyed. Despite this, even in such a difficult period, he did not stop playing. He did it not just because he loved games. When he held the joystick in his hands, it seemed that he was connected to his parents just as before, feeling their warmth and care. Psychologists would say that this was his way of dealing with his pain. Over time, the boy realized that gaming was his life. At the age of 12, he was already one of the strongest esports players. His talent was quickly noticed, and at the age of 13, he competed in the World Championship as part of the strongest esports team. Despite his young age, he was very good at strategy and had the best reaction speed. On that day, he won the title of Absolute World Champion. The stands literally erupted with cheers, shouting just one phrase, "One frame champion!" At that moment, it seemed that life had finally fallen into place and that a bright future awaited him. However, life is very treacherous and unpredictable. The day after the World Championship, the owner of their team announced the termination of all contracts and the end of the project. There were several reasons for this. First, the company sponsoring the competition changed its business direction. Second, all game development studios stopped developing games for consoles and computers and focused on virtual reality games. Just like that, in a matter of seconds, Eric lost everything he had been striving for many years. Suddenly, one of the team members shouted happily, "Maybe it's for the best. Console games aren't as popular anymore. Besides, we've already received an offer to become pro gamers at Ripple." Our hero just stood there and watched as the team they had worked together with disappeared. "Hey, Eric, where you going? Any team will take you," the guys asked cheerfully. But he just stood there trying to comprehend everything that was happening. He had devoted his entire life to gaming. In a moment of deep despair, the very anger that would consume him in the future awakened in the young man. He was sure that the popularity of console games would not decline, and he would still be the best. At one point, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. Unable to bear the pain, Eric fell to the floor and began to scream hysterically. This is the real reason for our hero's hatred of Ripple. And now we return to the present day. Classes had long since ended, but Eric was still at school, worrying about his friend. Mark asked if he was okay. "Everything's fine, I just had a bad dream," Eric replied. "Yeah, right, I'll walk you home," Mark added. "No, don't bother," our hero replied rudely. "I didn't ask you. I have something to discuss with you, so let's go together," the boy continued. Trying to figure out what Mark wanted from him, Eric ran out of the classroom after him. He accidentally bumped into the school's main bully, Anthony. Without paying any attention to it, our hero apologized and simply walked away. In general, it was a normal situation that happened and was forgotten, especially since Eric apologized. But Anthony is a real bastard. He beats people up just for looking at him funny or coughing loudly. In other words, he's a real lunatic, and you can be sure he won't let this situation go. Meanwhile, we move on to our hero's home. The first thing Mark noticed was the mess in the apartment. There was trash scattered everywhere and a thick layer of dust on the floor. "Eric, you need to clean up, then you'll feel better," Mark said excitedly. "Yeah, I'll get to it sometime. Now tell me, what brings you here?" Reaching into his backpack, the guy shouted happily, "I brought you a gift." "A gift?" Eric asked in surprise. "Yes, a gift. You may not like it, but you should think about it," Mark continued. Then he took out the gift and happily handed it to our hero. And what do you think it was? It was a brand new, latest model Ripple. At the sight of it, Eric froze like a statue, unable to believe that Mark had actually done it. When he came to his senses, he shouted angrily, "How many times have I told you I'm not going to play this game?" "I've heard that before, but are you really going to let one frame die just like that?" Mark asked. These words were like an electric shock to our hero. His friend found out that at the age of 13, Eric had become the champion of the game Manhwa, and that he was called a genius. But after ending his career as an esportsman, our hero carefully covered his tracks, so that no one in high school would find out about his past. In short, Mark offered Eric a chance to play his favorite game in exchange for keeping his secret. Suddenly, the guy said, "I know why you hate Reaple so much, but time is passing. Don't waste your talent." Looking closely, our hero realized that Mark was offering him to play the game that had broken up their team. Seeing the doubt in his friend's eyes, the guy added, "If you don't care about yourself, do it for me, at least once. I promise I won't ask you for anything else." 2 years ago, Eric promised himself he would never wear those damn glasses. But for Mark, who had been his only friend all this time, he decided to make an exception. The connection to the Reaple system was successful. The first thing to do, as in any game, was to create a character. Come up with a name, choose a class, and all that stuff. Finding himself in virtual reality for the first time, Eric understood why everyone was so fascinated by it. All his senses were exactly the same as in reality. He felt and saw everything around him. For a moment, he even felt happy. But that feeling quickly turned to anger. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to a bright game window. It was a regular game menu with settings, instructions, and various information. Since Eric had logged into the Reaple system for the first time, he had to complete training. He wanted to skip it, but completing the training was one of the conditions for changing his game name. So he had no choice but to agree. After the training began, the space he was in started to change. A cold concrete floor and bare walls appeared. A moment later, a sign appeared. "Welcome to PowerQuan." Now Eric felt like a small child who was about to discover the world. It was both frightening and exciting. During the training phase, the avatar is formed randomly. Fortunately, it can be changed after training, just like a nickname. A few seconds later, our hero was already standing in new clothes. Reaple dressed him in a black torn robe which looked very cool. As sad as he was about this thought, he really liked the game so far. But then he noticed a lonely wooden mannequin. The training begins with learning a few basic techniques, which can be learned by following the instructions. Regardless of actual physical characteristics, everyone has the same stats during training. Thanks to his past gaming experience, Eric had a few moves in his arsenal. And luckily for him, they worked here. With his first strike, he destroyed the first mannequin, but another one appeared in its place, on which our hero decided to try his kicks. 10 mannequins later, the training on the mannequins was complete. The next and final step was to fight a real opponent. Eric still couldn't understand one thing. Yes, everything around him felt like the real world. But can you feel the fun when playing this? Of course, at that moment, he was speaking with a certain bias. A couple of minutes later, the Reaple system selected an opponent for our hero for the final test. After loading, a guy in a red jacket appeared. Seeing our hero, the stranger said, "I've been waiting for this for so long. Welcome to the training hall. Don't think I'll go easy on you just because you're a newbie. You're a pathetic noob," added the guy. Before starting the fight, the guy asked if this was a second account, and if our hero was actually a pro. Surprised by this question, Eric replied, "No, this is my only account." Noticing a game window behind the guy, our hero added, "What's that? Dude, did you just come out of a coma? This is a live broadcast. Right now, thousands of viewers will see me kick your ass," the stranger replied smugly. Holding back laughter, our hero added, "Oh, I see. Yes, that's how it is. Are you definitely a newbie? You're wearing pretty standard gear, right?" the guy asked apprehensively. The answer remained the same. But Erica was alarmed that he had been asked this question. Convinced that his opponent was indeed a newbie, the guy went on the attack. Before Eric could blink, the enemy's fist was already right in front of his face. Dodging, our hero shouted, "Up!" But he couldn't dodge the next blow, and Eric felt intense pain from the missed punch. Confused, he didn't know what to do, but his opponent took advantage of the situation and continued to attack. As a result, Eric was beaten like a real noob. Who even came up with the idea of pitting a professional against a novice in the same fight? Taking blow after blow, our hero tried to come up with a plan. And at that moment, it dawned on him that the combat system in Reaple was exactly the same as in Maofi, in which he was the champion. Physical settings are not only built into his body. That's why Eric was able to block the attacking combo just now. Realizing all this, our hero took action. Grabbing his opponent's wrist and twisting it with all his might, the guy managed to break free from the hold. Now that he understood how the combat system worked, he was going to win this fight. At that moment, the chat exploded with excitement. No one expected such a trick from a beginner. Analyzing what had just happened, the guy realized that Eric was superior to him in reaction speed, which meant he could easily block all of his previous attacks. Meanwhile, our hero just stood there and looked at his trembling hands. They were shaking not from fear or pain, but from the realization that he could become the best at this game. Suddenly, his opponent shouted, "Judging by the way you move, it seems that you are used to games of this type." Got it. I'll call this video, Teaching a Lesson to a Pro Who Pretended to be a Newbie. Since you're stronger than I thought, there's no point in holding back, the guy added with a sinister smile. Eric still didn't fully understand what was happening. Virtual reality was completely new to him, and now he was fighting a clearly strong player. In any case, if this duel was part of the training, our hero wanted to do it perfectly. Finally, for the first time in a long time, his former passion for the game awakened in him. But at that moment, the Reapel device ran out of power, and Eric was forcibly returned to reality. Waking up and seeing that he was lying in bed, the guy cried out in fear, "What the hell? When did I fall asleep?" Without thinking for a second, he jumped out of bed and ran to put the device on charge. And then he asked himself, "Did I have fun?" But these thoughts were quickly replaced by disappointment in himself. However, according to the live chat, he still won the battle. By the way, his opponent was a D-rank player with the nickname Feeder. He constantly competes with newbies from his second account, humiliating them, but today, in front of thousands of viewers, he lost to a dubious newbie. The recording of their battle shook the entire Re-APL community and forums. The video quickly went viral, and the next day everyone was talking about it, and Reapel users began to take an interest in the so-called user. Because of this incident, Eric showed his awesome talent and skill. One fine day, he will write a new story in the world of Reapel. But let's not rush things. The next day, Eric went to school as usual. As soon as he entered the classroom, Mark eagerly awaited even a word from him. A little embarrassed, our hero said, "I don't understand why you are so into these games. Come on, did you see the news about the newbie who beat a high-ranking player? They've even nicknamed him BERSERK because of his distinctive clothing. Just think, a newbie managed to defeat Feeder, who is third on the leaderboard. They say that at the moment of victory, he flashed a terrifying smile. Everyone is talking about him," Mark said enthusiastically. But he has no idea that this amazing newcomer is his best friend. Soon, everyone will learn the true identity of this hero, thanks to the hunters. So Eric listened to his friend, then said, "Now I understand why I get so many messages in the game. They ask if I want to become a pro in some FAMA or something like that. They offer to join and so on. You finally admitted it. Be careful, that's my advice to you. It's better to avoid a place called Fafa TV, Mark replied anxiously. Hearing this, a silent question appeared on our hero's face. Fafa TV is a closed club for high school students called Fighter Fight. Hooligans gather there and fight, sharing their ranks with each other via a streaming platform. They organize fights among participants with the help of illegal or semi-legal sponsors. And if you reach a certain rank, the sponsors on the platform pay out a huge cash prize. It sounds cool, of course, but it's all illegal. What's more, it's incredibly dangerous, as many members of this club are willing to kill their opponents in real life just to get the money. All this time, the guy's conversation was being eavesdropped on. This girl is the famous fighter Fafa TV and Hunter. Hunters track down players in real life. She had no doubt that Eric was the newbie who defeated Feeder. However, she was surprised at how different he was from his gaming avatar. The question remains, what will she do with this information? The rest of the day at school went as usual. Classes, duty, and a million taunts. Today, Eric got ready to go home faster than usual, and when Mark asked him if everything was okay, he replied that he needed to go to his part-time job. Since our hero was an orphan, he really did have to work after school. But to be honest, the money wasn't enough. He couldn't even afford a decent meal. He had no one to borrow from, and he was ashamed to ask his relatives, since he hardly ever consumed with them. While Eric was thinking about what to do, a guy quietly approached him from behind. Without a word, he hugged the guy and looked at him with a surprised expression on his face. Suddenly, out of nowhere, another guy appeared. "Do you think it's him?" one of them asked. "It's him." "Well, you idiot, "It's time to answer for your actions," said the stranger with a grim smile and a creepy voice. "If you think Hunter sold information about him to someone, you're wrong. This is Anthony's doing, and these two are his friends, Cardi and Kabi. Grabbing our hero, they took him to an abandoned wing of the school, where Anthony beat him up. Finding himself in this situation, Eric couldn't believe that all this was just because he accidentally bumped into Anthony in the hallway. Besides him, there were two other guys there, from whom the bullies constantly took money. Anthony took genuine pleasure in bullying other people. Suddenly, our hero overheard an interesting conversation, from which he learned that Anthony had lost a lot of money yesterday on Fafa TV. But don't think that he fought himself. He didn't have enough courage. He placed a bet and lost. When Mark told Eric about Fafa TV, he thought he was exaggerating. But after Anthony's words, he realized that it was serious. Suddenly, Cardi said, "Listen, can we just beat him up like that? What if he tells someone?" "Since when did you start caring about that?" "He's an orphan. He has no friends. He's a real piece of trash," the guy replied with a laugh. Hearing this, Eric didn't understand how the bully could know so much about him since they had never met before. "Say to take it anymore," our hero shouted, "You're a pathetic idiot who wants to look cool." "Wow, looks like someone's got balls of steel," Anthony whispered to Eric with a scary look on his face. Despite his calm voice, his eyes were filled with primal rage. Eric knew perfectly well what the bully would do to him for those words. In less than 5 seconds, the calm guy turned into a rabid dog. At that moment, the girl who was with them said she heard someone's footsteps. A moment later, Hunter herself walked into the office. Seeing Eric being beaten, she said calmly, "Let him go." "Who are you?" "It doesn't matter. Come in. I'll play with you as soon as I'm done with this trash," Anthony replied. "You can shut your mouth, it stinks. All you can do is bully the weak in the abandoned wing," added the stranger. But then Cardi interrupted their conversation. Standing in front of the girl and staring at her, the guy said, "Listen, this is none of your business, so don't interfere or you'll end up in his place. Not brushing your teeth. Is that some kind of new trend? Move your foot or I'll kill you," the girl replied with a stony face. "Princess, you've picked on the wrong guy. If you want, I'll knock out a couple of your teeth, too," Cardi continued confidently. Looking more closely at this girl, Anthony realized that he had seen her somewhere before. And then it dawned on him. This girl was a high-ranking player on Fafa TV, better known as Iron. Realizing who was standing in front of them, Anthony shouted in a trembling voice, "Carti, wait!" But it was too late. Iron, without a word, punched the guy right in the face, breaking his nose. This came as a real shock to those present, as no one except Anthony had any idea what she was capable of. Eric couldn't believe his eyes. A fragile girl had knocked out a big guy with one punch. Looking at Marty bleeding, Erin said, "You're a nobody who thinks he's God." Her gaze alone was terrifying, but fighting her was suicide. Anthony knew that very well, so he had no choice but to watch his friend bleed to death. But not everyone was as smart as he was. One of the bullies had the courage to insult her, and even despite his friend's warning, this idiot continued to hurl abuse at Irina. Then he actually got into a fight, wanting to avenge Cardi. Seeing all this, Anthony desperately shouted, "No, Kabi, stop!" Eric watched all this and didn't understand what was going on. Who was she, and what did she want? But one thing he knew for sure. She was deliberately provoking the bullies to attack her. At that moment, there were more questions than answers. After watching her for a while, our hero realized that she was a professional fighter, moving calmly and confidently. And unlike these hooligans, she didn't swing her fists thoughtlessly. She waited for the right moment, and she delivered just one precise blow that ended it all. In the end, Kabi ended up just like his friend, with a broken nose and a couple of knocked-out teeth. Eric looked at Erin as if she were a hero from a video game. Having finished with Kabi and Cardi, the girl stared at Anthony with a malicious look and said, "What will you choose?" But in response, she heard only indistinct mumbling. Unlike his friends, Anthony knew who she was and what she was capable of. Realizing that he had to say something, the boy whispered in a trembling voice, "The rumors about you on Fafa TV turned out to be true. I welcome you, Erin. How do you like our school?" Anthony added. "There are a lot of idiots like everywhere else, and it's noisy," Erin replied calmly. "Since you know who I am and are behaving tolerably, I'll give you a chance to take your idiot friends and leave," the girl added. Without a moment's hesitation, Anthony took advantage of this chance and left silently. When everything calmed down, the girl approached Eric and began to ask him what had happened. Suddenly, Erin began to touch our hero's cheek, examining his bruises, which made the guy very embarrassed. At one point, it seemed to him that she was genuinely concerned about him. She even gave him some ointment for bruises. After making sure that our hero was okay, the girl went out into the hallway and made a phone call. "Did you check on the two I told you about?" "Yes, I did," replied Irina. "Great! What do you think of them? Can we call them our people?" asked the voice on the phone. "Unfortunately not. They turned out to be just a bunch of idiots." "I'm against it," the girl replied. "Too bad. The placement exam is coming up soon, so hurry up," Steve added. "I know, but I wanted to ask you for a favor. I need you to keep an eye on someone," Erin said excitedly. Meanwhile, after the whole thing with Anthony and his friends, Eric ran to his part-time job. Fortunately, thanks to Irene's help, he wasn't late. He couldn't get her out of his head. He knew she was from Fafa TV, but why did she help him? However, Eric learned one simple rule. If someone helps you and asks for nothing in return, you should be grateful. In his free time from school, our hero worked as a waiter. The work was very hard, but it didn't pay much, barely enough to keep him from starving. But it was the only place he could get a job as a student. Suddenly, the manager approached Eric and said with a dissatisfied look that he was needed at table 20. As you might have guessed, he was treated the same way at work as he was at school. Approaching the table, our hero said in a trembling voice, "You called me." But in response, he heard only silence. Suddenly, the stranger turned his head sharply and stared intently into his eyes. A moment later, a creepy smile appeared on his face. This stranger looked scary, as if he is plotting something bad. Trying to understand what was going on, Eric began to question the guest. "Excuse me, did you not like the ramen or salad?" "Oh no, don't worry, everything is fine. I called you because I wanted to praise you," the guest said unexpectedly and happily. After that, our hero left with a very strange feeling. The guy heard Eric tell the manager that he thought the man was strange. What he heard caused a storm of emotions in the stranger. Then he grabbed his head in panic and whispered, "Damn, this is a complete failure." As you may have guessed, this guest was Erin's friend, Steve. After meeting our hero, the guy thought the girl had gone mad because she wanted to get him on Fafa TV. But then, in Eric's file, Steve saw something interesting and decided to check it out. Somehow, Erin found out that a few years ago, our hero was a famous esports player under the nickname One Frame. Imagine his surprise when he found an article about our hero, which said that he was a world champion in a variety of console games. The file was truly amazing, but Steve still had doubts about him, all because of his introverted nature and sickly appearance. He only had to look at Eric once to realize that he would not get involved in a fight. But Erin is never wrong in her choices, so the guy decided to watch our hero for a while longer to find out what was so special about him. In general, Eric's work shift was going as usual, calm and boring. But then two guys walked into the computer club, and our hero heard familiar voices. It was Kabi and Cardi. But what were they doing at the computer club? After all, like everyone else, they had long since switched to Reaple. Since they were guests, Eric turned around and politely said, "Welcome." But when he realized that it was indeed them, he froze in fear, afraid that the guys wanted revenge. Kabi and Cardi were also surprised to see our hero here, because they didn't know he worked at the computer club. Without thinking twice, they decided to take advantage of the situation and grabbed Eric. "Well, you idiot, here we are, and no one can help you here," Cabby whispered in a creepy voice, leaning over. Looking into the guy's crazed eyes, our hero had only one question in his head. Why did they come here? Meanwhile, Steve was thinking about what to do next. Initially, he wanted to give Eric a test, but it seemed pointless to him. In short, he found himself in a difficult situation. After looking at Eric's file again, Steve decided that it wasn't worth it. Irene would say that our hero had simply failed the test. But as he was leaving the club, he saw an interesting situation. Two hooligans grabbed Eric and dragged him away, and even the administrator's threats to call the police didn't stop them. Compared to them, our guy looked pathetic and weak. However, upon closer inspection, Steve realized that these two bullies were the very guys Erin had called unsuitable. Unexpectedly for him, the situation turned out well. Kabi and Cardi were suitable opponents for the test. After dragging Eric into the backyard and making sure no one was watching them, the bullies began to taunt the guy. "Listen, worm, because of you we both got beaten up by that psycho. And for that you'll pay with your blood," Cabby shouted in a frenzied voice. But then Carty stopped him. "You're Eric, right?" "Actually, we're victims just like you. Anthony beat you up, not us. Out of the goodness of our hearts, we made a deal with him not to touch you. In return, you will give us half of your salary every day, agreed?" said Carty, pressing our hero against the wall. Seeing this, Steve understood why Erin didn't want to get involved with them. The whole situation with the bullies was absurd. Our hero sincerely did not understand why he had to pay someone just because he accidentally bumped into someone in the hallway once. However, he understood perfectly well that if he paid them once, they would demand money constantly. Realizing the consequences of his choice, Eric shouted, "I won't pay you!" "Look who's found the courage to speak up," whispered Carty with a laugh. Then he punched our hero right in the face. "I'll give you one more chance. If you don't agree to pay, I'll avoid you every day," the guy added. If you think Eric suddenly became brave, you are greatly mistaken. He was incredibly scared. Nevertheless, he refused to pay again. "Looks like I hit you too hard. Do you understand what will happen to you if you refuse us?" the bully asked in surprise. "You must be deaf. I'll repeat it again so that you two idiots understand." "I won't pay you a penny," our hero shouted, standing in a fighting stance. That was brave. Reckless, but very brave. Of course, after the refusal, Cabby and Carty began to beat Eric even harder. They promised to stop if he paid them. Watching this situation, Steve understood why our hero had caught Erin's interest. But now he faced a difficult choice: to help Eric or leave things as they were. While our hero was still conscious, he decided not to intervene, hoping that Eric would be able to prove himself. Suddenly, the bullies stopped. Wiping the blood from his fists, Carty said, "What a pathetic sight, and you could have avoided all this." He grabbed Eric by the hair and squeezed as hard as he could. Carty lifted him off the wall and whispered, "Eric, you're not a stupid guy. Just pay up and live your pathetic life on." "I get it. You guys are real idiots. I said it twice and I'll say it again. No!" our hero replied, spitting blood. "You made your choice and you know the consequences," Carty shouted, kicking Eric in the head like a soccer ball. After kicking him a couple more times, the guy stopped and gave our hero 5 minutes to think. Suddenly, Cabby said, "Listen, man, why are you so attached to these pennies? Just give them back and that's it. You don't even know how to fight, and yet you have the nerve to resist. Understand, we'll make your life hell." "What did you just say? Make my life hell? Don't make me laugh. You're a couple of idiots who obviously hide in corners when no one is looking," Eric replied hoarsely as he got up from the floor. Meanwhile, Steve decided to call the police. He didn't want to get involved in the fight himself, but he couldn't leave Eric either. The guy had already accepted that Erin was wrong, and that our hero was not the person they were looking for. Suddenly, he heard loud laughter coming from the alley. Peeking around the corner, the guy saw Cabby pointing at Eric and shouting something indistinctly. The reason for their laughter was that our hero had assumed a fighting stance. Despite the enemy's absolute superiority, Eric was ready to fight. He had no intention of giving up his money. After laughing his fill, Carty began to take off his jacket. With a sinister smile on his face, the guy said, "You're such an idiot. Until now, I was just playing with you, but now I'm going to destroy you. I recommend you take sick leave." But even despite the threats, Eric did not back down. At that moment, Steve got through to the police, but immediately hung up. The most interesting part was about to begin, and he didn't want to interrupt it. Eric had never fought in his life, but his body still remembered the battle in Reapel. Besides, everything in the real world is much slower than in the game, so he hoped his reactions would be enough. But the bully's powerful hook quickly dispelled that illusion. Despite his lightning-fast reaction, our hero took blow after blow. He saw how Carty prepared for the blow and how he delivered it. But he couldn't do anything about it. Fear paralyzed his body and mind. Each blow caused Eric incredible pain. Nevertheless, he was not going to give up. On the contrary, his competitive spirit was awakened. He saw all of Carty's attacks, which meant he could dodge them. After missing a few blows, Eric began to adapt to his opponent. Carty's blows were becoming more and more predictable. Our hero just had to wait for the right moment to dodge. Having learned Carty's attacking combination, Eric was finally able to do it. This greatly surprised the bully because after so many missed blows, he was still standing. However, our hero still lacked agility. After missing with his first strike, Kabi launched an unexpected attack to the side. Each missed blow gave Eric invaluable experience, which he quickly mastered. Thanks to this, he began to dodge Cardi's blows more and more often. Our hero treated this fight like a game, learning his opponent's combinations and understanding his patterns. This meant that he could now turn the situation to his advantage. The bully was shocked and angry, not expecting Eric to learn how to dodge his blows. It wasn't just gaming experience that allowed our hero to do this. He copied most of his moves from Irina when she fought the bullies. The biggest problem now was that Cardi didn't give him a second to rest. He attacked relentlessly, and in those moments, Eric felt his lack of experience in real combat. Meanwhile, Steve was still watching them. And finally, he understood why our hero had been called the genius of instant reaction. No one in the world could dodge so quickly without the proper experience. But then something happened that no one expected. Eric was able to dodge and counterattack. Unfortunately, not everything went so well. Yes, the guy managed to land a blow, but Kabi simply blocked it with a block. Moreover, the force of his blow was incredibly weak. Seeing this, Steve slapped his face with his palm and started swearing. After our hero's unsuccessful counterattack, the bully grabbed his arm and started breaking his fingers. Then, with a crazy look in his eyes, he whispered, "You seem to have completely lost your fear." He pulled Eric with all his might. Cardi hit him with his knee with such force that the guy's vision went dark. And he wasn't going to stop there, so that our hero would feel the most intense pain of his life. But Eric didn't give in to panic and continued to do what he does best: dodge. But very soon there was nowhere left to retreat, and he was backed up against the wall. In a rage, Cardi began to attack even more fiercely than before, but his blows became reckless. This was a huge advantage for Eric, as it became much easier to dodge. But he couldn't dodge forever, as our hero quickly tired from the severe beatings. However, the progress he had made and his unwillingness to lie in his own pool of blood gave him the strength to continue. Realizing that he couldn't hurt Cardi with his blows, Eric decided to act more cunningly. He would continue to dodge until the bully got tired. Steve watched their fight with delight. But he did not expect that the skinny and sickly-looking boy would be able to do anything. However, he didn't understand one thing: why our hero wasn't hitting back. Knowing that Eric was good at strategy, he decided to just watch, expecting nothing. Eric looked pitiful now, but Steve saw potential in him, just like Irin did. The guy understood that if he trained our hero, he could become a good fighter. After a while, the moment came when Cardi got tired. This jerk wanted to beat Eric so badly that he used up all his strength and achieved nothing. At that moment, Kabi laughed and said, "Hey, Cardi, you're completely exhausted. This kid is just making fun of you." The guy understood this perfectly well, and it was a huge blow to his pride. But as they say, the most dangerous animal is a cornered animal. Suddenly, Cardi shouted with crazy eyes, "Do you miss your mom and dad? I'll send you to them right now." These words disarmed Eric like no blow could have done. The loss of his parents was the most difficult moment in his life, one he had tried to forget. But Cardi's words brought him back to that state. Noticing that something was wrong with our hero, the bully went on the attack. For him, it was a matter of principle to emerge from this fight as the absolute winner. And this time, Eric couldn't dodge. Cardi's fist tore the skin on his cheek and broke his nose. It looked like it was over. Our hero's eyes began to roll back and his body fell to the ground like a stone. Seeing blood splattered everywhere, Steve also thought it was the end. To be honest, even Eric himself thought it was over. He didn't expect Cardi to have enough strength for such a powerful blow. That's it. Our hero is lying unconscious in a dark alley, covered in blood. Kabi even began to worry that his friend had gone too far and killed Eric. "What are we going to do now?" Kabi asked fearfully. "Don't worry. If he gets up, I'll knock him out again," Cardi replied, feeling completely immune to punishment. Now Steve feels guilty that he didn't help Eric earlier and didn't call the police. But he honestly didn't suspect that things would go this far. Now our hero is just lying there and it seems like he's not even breathing. But then, his index finger twitched. That means he's still alive. But then something amazing happened. Eric surprised everyone once again and got to his feet. "What a stubborn idiot! Wasn't that enough for you?" Cardi shouted angrily. "Hey, Cabby, make sure no one comes here," added the bully, slowly approaching our hero. At that moment, Eric just stood silently, leaning against the wall. Suddenly, a faint smile appeared on his face, and he said something quietly. "I didn't knock your teeth out, so if you want to say something, say it loud," Cardi said with a smile. Spitting out all the blood in his mouth, our hero whispered, "I'll kill you." "Did I hear you say you're going to kill me?" asked the bully, looking puzzled. But in response, he received only a powerful uppercut. Seeing this, Steve shouted enthusiastically in surprise. But that was only the beginning. Following a powerful right-handed punch, Eric kicked Marty straight in the ribs. Falling to the ground, the guy screamed in pain like a little girl. Placing his dirty boot on his snow-white shirt, our hero said loudly and clearly, "I'll kill you." Let's go back a couple of minutes when Eric was unconscious. At that moment, he accepted that he had lost and accepted his fate. At that moment, she appeared. The dark side. The one our hero had hated Reaple for all this time. Many would consider this a split personality, but no. The dark side is all the emotions he had hidden for many years. Closing his nose, trying to stop the bleeding, he whispered in a trembling voice, "What did you just do? Did you hit me?" The guy didn't understand what was going on, but one look was enough to realize that this was not the Eric he knew. It's hard to put into words, but now our hero looks completely different. He no longer looks like a harmless weakling, he looks more like a serial killer. Nevertheless, Cardi wanted to take revenge on him, so he went on the attack. But Eric easily dodged his punches, laughing quietly as he did so. But now he wasn't just dodging his opponent's blows, he was also counterattacking very successfully. Cardi simply couldn't wrap his head around the idea that our hero could beat him up while laughing. But that was the reality he had to accept. To Eric, he was just a piñata. The bully made a huge mistake. He panicked, and while he was trying to come up with something, he didn't notice how our hero knocked out his jaw with a clever trick. Suddenly, Eric stopped, and his creepy smile turned into a hysterical scream. Stretching out his arms, he said, "You know, it actually hurts." "It hurts to hit people, but it's crazy fun," our hero added with wild eyes. At that moment, Cart thought that Eric had hit his head hard and gone mad. Suddenly, the guy gathered his thoughts and was able to grab our hero by the arm again. Clenching his fist, the bully said, "Gotcha! What are you going to do now?" Despite our hero's temporary superiority, Cart was sure he would win. After all, he had much more experience and, most importantly, he was physically stronger. But then Eric stopped the guy's blow with his jaw and said through laughter, "You still think you'll win?" Then he jumped up with incredible speed, and with a turn he kicked Cardi right in the neck. Of course, after such a blow, the guy couldn't stay on his feet. And because of the precise hit to the carotid artery, the bully began to lose consciousness. At that moment, he felt all his strength leave his body. His arms and legs stopped obeying him, and he fell to his knees on the floor. While this outcome of the fight was unexpected for Cardi, Steve noticed how Eric deliberately struck an important organ to neutralize his opponent. Advantages in a fight are usually determined by weight class. This means that a novice like Eric has his limits. This was one of the reasons why Cardi did not suffer much damage during our hero's attack. But even beginners have a chance to defeat an experienced fighter if they hit a vulnerable area or vital organs. After that blow, the bully sat motionless for several minutes and did not make a sound. Kabi realized that something had happened to his friend, and instead of just walking away, he wanted to take revenge on Eric. But his plan quickly fell apart when he heard the sound of a police car approaching. A minute later, a police officer and the computer club administrator who had called them ran into the alley. At that moment, Kabi lifted his friend onto his shoulders without hesitation and ran away to avoid being caught by the police. After everything that happened, Steve understood why Erin asked to follow our hero, but he didn't understand how she could see the power in him. This was the first time he had seen anything like this. Such outstanding talent. Even though he saw the entire fight from start to finish, he still didn't understand what had happened, because Eric had literally become a different person. After the hooligans left, our hero's expression changed dramatically. He became himself again. A second later, completely exhausted, he collapsed. This was to be expected after receiving such a beating. It was surprising that he was able to get back on his feet after that blow. Coming closer, Steve began to reflect on what he had seen and try to find answers to his questions. Looking at our hero's mutilated body, the guy whispered, "Even if we urgently need participants, this is too much." It never occurred to me to take on a newbie about whom we had no information, and I certainly didn't expect to see such calm judgment from him in an emergency situation. In addition, he knows how to think with his head, and all his attacks are accurate and logical. He has quick reactions, befitting an e-sportsman named One Frame. As always, Irina found uncut diamonds with value and high potential. But still, what was that? For now, it bothers me a lot. But on the other hand, if you want to get a good gem, you have to take a risk. Anyway, Eric, congratulations. You passed the test, Steve added, throwing a piece of paper at our hero's body. This piece of paper is just a test evaluation sheet. As he left, Steve whispered, "Take it easy and I'll contact you later. Have a good time on Fafa TV, and we'll see you tomorrow." At the moment when Steve began training our hero. At that moment, Eric's main weakness was his terrible physical condition. So that's the problem Steve started working on. There wasn't a single muscle group that was in good shape. So Eric did everything: push-ups, squats, and kilometer runs. But most of all, he disliked pull-ups, which he couldn't do. In just half an hour of training under Steve's guidance, our hero nearly lost consciousness several times. Despite this, the recruit didn't even think about giving him a break. The exam was fast approaching, which meant they had no time to spare. To motivate Eric in some way, Steve promised to take him somewhere as soon as they finished training. To be honest, our hero wasn't ready for such drastic changes in his life, and maybe he rushed into his decision. Yesterday, after the fight with Cardi, the guy was found by the administrator and a police officer. After a medical examination, it turned out that his injuries were not so serious. However, because of this, Erica was fired from her part-time job as the police began to investigate the circumstances, and it turned out that the club owner had not been paying taxes. In short, he had a lot of problems that needed to be solved immediately. On his way home, he ran into Steve. Steve had been waiting for him at the club exit the whole time to talk. Without thinking twice, the guy offered our hero to join Fafa TV. But before Eric could give any answer, Steve explained everything in detail. Not about Fafa TV, but about a game called Coliseum, a bunch of hooligans fighting to take over neighborhoods. During a situation when, due to a chaotic ranking system, areas of lawlessness had formed. The only way to determine each person's skills was created. One-on-one combat in Reapel, which is used to determine ranks, the so-called Coliseum. However, this turned into a regular game that assigned ranks, and becoming a place for dogfights, a single game path called Fafa TV emerged. That evening, Steve admitted that he was looking for someone to fight, and that he had seen Eric's fight and was interested in him. Our hero was curious to learn the history of the creation of the fighting club. But he declined the stranger's offer, saying that he was not interested in fighting. Steve was persistent. Smiling, he said, "The choice is yours, of course, but I saw that you liked fighting, didn't you, One Frame?" Hearing this, Eric was frightened. He didn't understand how a man he had only met twice in his life knew so much about him. While our hero said nothing, Steve continued, "I know you don't like Reapel, but this is completely different. Even though you've only had one fight behind you, from which you emerged victorious, didn't you feel what it was like? Ways to win." Sighing heavily, our hero whispered, "It was my first fight, and I don't understand what you want from me." Feeling that the conversation was not going well, Steve interrupted Eric. "Before you give your final answer, I wanted to say that we give a monthly allowance and dividends from victory." He then went on to say that this money would be much more than the guy could earn from a part-time job. But that wasn't necessary anymore, Eric agreed. He lost his job and was ready to take on anything just to earn money. That's how they met. And now Steve is squeezing every last drop out of our hero. By the way, our hero ran today's 3-kilometer marathon in 12 minutes and 57 seconds. To be honest, it was a terrible result and spoke to his poor endurance. By the way, I think now is the time to get to know Steve a little better. He is 20 years old and is a master of the Coliseum clan called Linderdog. And even despite the terrible results of the race, Eric was pleased with himself. After all, he had never done anything like this before. Suddenly, our hero said, "Mr. Hibby, can I ask you something?" "First of all, just call me Steve. And you can ask me anything," replied the guy. Eric was interested in Fafa TV. To be more precise, are gaming clans somehow connected to hooligans? He received a negative answer. After thinking for a moment, he asked another question. "Then what's the point of having a clan?" Smiling, Steve replied, You're a smart kid. It works like this. FAFA TV runs the game Coliseum. It imposes fees on outsiders. The main profit comes from entrance fees, views, bets, monthly subscriptions, and commissions. Now I understand if I become their esports player, they'll pay me for it. Our hero whispered thoughtfully. No, players have something else. Steve interrupted loudly. It's not possible to simply register as an esports player by just joining. To become part of the Coliseum, you have to pay the fees and pass a game code test. To reach the basic rank, you need to contribute over 500,000 won. Upon learning about this fee, Eric had a question. Where would ordinary school children get that kind of money? Seeing that our hero was confused, Steve said with a smile, "That's what people like me are for. Clan leaders look for talented kids and take care of the money. Then the clan makes a profit, and the esportsman is happy. Simply put, it's just business. But keep in mind that it's illegal," Steve added with a sinister smile. Overall, Eric understood everything except for one thing. Why was he chosen? After all, even compared to the simplest hooligans, he was physically inferior. That was the end of their training session. Steve wanted to take our hero to a certain place, where they would get a special code to enter the game, and at the same time, introduce Eric to the rest of the team. We are already quite familiar with some of them, and as you might have guessed, Irin was also part of the Linderdog clan. Steve also gave our hero a special cell phone for personal use. Suddenly, an interesting scene caught Eric's eye. Some guy was doing very indecent things with a girl right in front of everyone. Looking around, our hero realized that Steve had brought him to a not-so-nice part of town. Hooligans, scum, and everyone else that normal people try to avoid were here. But they had no other choice. The code for the Coliseum could only be obtained here. This place used to be a gathering spot for teams. Before the Coliseum was moved to Reapel, it was done at this site. Now, even groups of friends can gather here. But given its past, only scum and Coliseum participants gather here. Suddenly, Steve shouted joyfully, "Oh, it's them! We're here, Irin!" Hearing that name, Eric couldn't believe his ears. It was Irin, the one who saved him from Anthony. Seeing our heroes, the two guys shouted without hesitation, "Irene, have you completely lost your mind? The one in the cap is still normal, but the other one looks like a corpse." But our hero paid no attention to their words. He still couldn't believe what was happening. However, when he saw the girl, a picture began to form in his head of everything that had happened to him over the past few days. Meet Irin Adler, member of the Linderdog clan, D-rank fighter, and deputy clan leader. All this time, as Eric and Steve approached, the guys continued to mock our hero. Suddenly, Irin said, "You took a long time, brother." Hearing this, the expression on the guys' faces changed dramatically. They ran up to Steve and began to sarcastically apologize for their words and look at Eric more closely. Suddenly, one of them said, "Hey kid, are you from the clan too?" A little embarrassed, our hero replied, "Yes, I recently joined." Immediately after these words, the stranger laughed out loud, his laughter audible even at the other end of the street. His partner did the same, which embarrassed Irin a little. "Steve, I knew that the clan was not going through the best of times, but to take him on as a team member? That's a good one." One of the guys shouted right in Steve's face, unable to hold back his laughter. At that moment, the second guy said, "What are you surprised about? It doesn't matter who he takes on the team, because he has his beloved little sister, who is ranked D," the guy added, hugging the girl. Of course, Irina didn't like this attitude. Without thinking twice, she grabbed one of the guys by the arm and broke a couple of his fingers. Then she whispered in a dark voice, "I don't care about your mockery or sarcastic comments, but touch me again and I'll break more than just your fingers." Irina may not look scary, but she's not to be trifled with. So the guys didn't think twice, turned around and left. But before leaving, one of them said, "The coder isn't here today, so it's better to just leave." Instead of beating them up, the guy just thanked them for the information. Left alone, Steve jokingly said, "The slums haven't changed at all. It even reminds me of my childhood." "Bro, do you think that's funny?" Irin asked in a serious voice. "There's nothing you can do about it. You're a high-ranking player, so you can't fight," the guy replied. Despite her status and participation in the Coliseum, Irin hated this area and everyone who hung out here. Suddenly, the girl turned to our hero and said in a gentle voice, "By the way, please love and cherish me, Eric." "Yeah, Irin, I'm glad to see you too." our hero replied in a surprised voice. What's with the intonation? Are you surprised that I'm a member of the clan? The girl asked curiously. Actually, yes, Eric whispered, confused. Suddenly, someone called Steve, and he left Eric and Erin alone. Our hero took advantage of this opportunity to find out a little more about the Colosseum. In particular, why a special code was needed to enter the game. The Colosseum was designed from the outset so that it cannot be downloaded without a code. And even more so, it is impossible to find out any information. I see, but what kind of test is it? Eric asked. It's hard to say. The tester does it at his own discretion, Erin replied. Realizing that he would most likely have to fight again, our hero suddenly laughed. Then, in a gloomy voice, he said, Irene, will your brother be very upset if I leave? I understand your feelings, but I'm sure Steve will put in a good word for you. I sigh heavily, replied the girl. But then she heard a strange cry and felt a sharp gust of air. A moment later, one of the guys standing next to her punched Eric in the face. Despite the crowd, fights are rare here due to the strict rules of the Colosseum. So a whole crowd of spectators gathered around them. Not understanding what was happening, Erin grabbed the attacker to prevent him from hitting Eric again. With eyes full of anger, she shouted, You bastard! What are you doing? Even though you're a D rank, keep your hands to yourself. This may be a revelation to you, but I'm a tester, the guy replied with a sly smile. This meant that Erin had no right to interfere in their fight and help Eric. Otherwise, he would fail the test and she would be banned from the Colosseum forever. Steve was called in just to deliver this news. The tester was Satami, a real thug worse than most, so there was reason to worry about Eric. But seeing how our hero can fight, Steve was sure that he could defeat Satami. Wiping the blood from his fists, the guy approached Eric and whispered with a sinister smile, Well, kid, shall we begin the test? Looking at his opponent, the guy couldn't even imagine what would have to happen for him to defeat him. A few minutes earlier, after Erin broke his finger. By coincidence, it was this guy that the Colosseum administration had appointed as today's tester. However, every player has the right to refuse the role of tester for a small fee. Sati wanted to exercise this right so as not to earn a reputation as someone who beats up weaklings. He always did this when he was assigned the role of tester. But then Steve uttered the fateful phrase, You're too cocky. I know he looks like a walking corpse, but that's his combat camouflage. I'm sure you're no match for him. And after those words, Satami, of course, couldn't resist and accepted his role as tester. In short, Steve is responsible for what is about to happen. Knowing her brother well enough, Erin understood at a glance that this was his doing. Noticing his sister's contemptuous look, Steve said with a smile, You better watch him, or you'll miss an interesting spectacle. At the same time, news of the fight quickly spread throughout the neighborhood. A girl named Foxy also heard about it. We'll meet her a little later. But she wasn't surprised by an ordinary fight. However, her interest grew sharply when she learned that one of the participants in the fight was someone of Satami's level. Meanwhile, the test was just beginning, attracting more and more spectators. Everyone knew Satami and wanted to be on good terms with him, so it was hard for our hero not only physically but also mentally, as the crowd around him shouted his opponent's name. Before Satami started fighting seriously, he asked his friends to bet a couple of million on his victory. Considering the odds, the winnings would be small, but that didn't matter to him. He wanted to show his superiority. Meanwhile, Eric got up and took a fighting stance, frantically trying to come up with some kind of plan. Noticing our hero's confused look, Satomi took advantage of the moment to attack. Compared to Karti, Satami moved much faster, and all his blows felt much heavier. But Eric had also learned a thing or two. He was able to block the first two blows and even dodged the third kick. This greatly surprised his opponent. After all, our hero doesn't look like someone capable of such a thing. Even Erin, who had advised taking him on, was shocked. At that moment, all the spectators around froze and fell silent in amazement. But a moment later, they were enthusiastically shouting words of support to Eric. Irene showed no emotion. She noticed that our hero's fighting style was similar to what she had seen in games. Her indifferent face did not mean that she felt nothing. Despite Eric's obvious lack of combat experience and physical strength, he was very fast. But that might not be enough against an enemy like Satami. Suddenly, someone in the crowd shouted, "Satami, you bastard, fight seriously, we bet a lot of money on you." Taking off his jacket, the guy replied with a sinister smile, "You guys are so bloodthirsty, I'm going to kill him." The locals knew that when Satami took off his jacket, he was preparing to fight with all his might. At the sight of his opponent's true physical form, Eric froze in horror. And it was well justified. Satami was an incredibly muscular guy, and his arms were like snakes, very long. Previously, our hero thought he had a small chance of winning, but now that chance had vanished. "Get ready!" the guy shouted loudly. Then, without hesitation, he started running towards Eric. Our hero had no intention of giving up. Calculating his opponent's speed and trajectory, he tried to dodge the blow, but it was unsuccessful, and Satami's fist hit his cheek. A sharp, piercing pain filled Eric's mind, making him an easy target. His opponent took advantage of this to continue his attack combination. In this situation, even our hero's reaction and speed did not help him. He took blow after blow, only occasionally trying to fight back in any way he could. Thanks to his strength, Satami gained absolute superiority, forcing our hero to constantly retreat. As an experienced fighter, he understood that this could lead to a very bad ending, and very quickly. And at some point, there was nowhere left to retreat. Without realizing it, our hero had backed himself into a corner, making himself an even easier target. But looking at Satami's sly smile, he realized that it wasn't him retreating, but his opponent driving him back. And now, with nowhere to run, the examiner unleashed a barrage of powerful attacks on Eric. In this situation, the only thing our hero could do was simply stand in a block and hope for the best. But the realization that nothing would be resolved on its own came quickly, and the guy tried to get out of the trap, but Satami caught him. Watching their fight, Irin was convinced of her choice. Eric clearly had ability and talent, but he lacked experience in real combat. Any more or less experienced fighter would understand that Satami was cornering him to reduce the opponent's chances of victory. At this moment, everything indicates that the tester will emerge victorious from this fight. But everything will depend solely on Eric, what steps he takes next. And you can be sure that after the first missed blow, the dark side has awakened. And now we will see something interesting. And silence fell around the arena. Everyone watched what was happening as if it were some kind of miracle. Even Irin took off her mask of indifference and exclaimed in surprise. There were two ways to get out of the situation Eric found himself in. The first was to dodge and get behind the opponent. Our hero tried, but it didn't work. The second was to break out of the corner with force. Waiting for the right moment between the samurai's blows, Eric launched a successful counterattack. However, one precise blow was not enough to defeat such an opponent. But our hero was not going to stop there. After awakening his dark side, Eric dodged the samurai's attacks without any problems. The technique of reading the enemy's attacks and countering them. This is Eric's special technique. Our hero soberly assessed his lack of strength, so going on the offensive was fraught with defeat for him. Therefore, the only way was to counterattack. This was the first time since the Colosseum was created that a rookie was able to draw blood from his tester. Wiping the blood from his cheek, Satami said with a sinister smile, "Hey kid, what did you do?" In response, our hero simply stood in a fighting stance and smiled. Of course, such arrogant behavior angered the tester even more, and he went on the attack again. Sati's movements became even faster and stronger. But even so, Eric dodged all of his blows. At that moment, his eyes were completely empty, as if he were about to lose consciousness. As Steve said, his pained expression was just a combat camouflage. Letting his opponent get as close as possible, our hero went on the attack. Of course, the power of his blows could not compare to Sati's, but unlike the tester, all of our hero's blows hit their target. At that moment, the audience began to cheer enthusiastically, and some even went to cancel their bets. Even an experienced fighter like Irin was surprised by the turn of events. She saw potential in Eric, but didn't think it would unfold so quickly. After a successful combination of attacks, our hero stopped. Sati took advantage of this moment with great pleasure to try to strike a blow. But the guy made one mistake and all his blows missed. Unlike when he cornered Eric, he was now attacking with strong, sweeping movements. Because of this, each strike took him longer to execute, making it easier for our hero to dodge. Sati's long arms could have been a huge problem, but Eric turned them to his advantage. After missing several more blows, the tester shouted, "Enough games, it's time to fight!" He then delivered a quick, powerful, and unexpected kick, breaking a couple of our hero's ribs. Due to his injuries, the guy started coughing up blood. But Satami didn't even think about stopping. He continued to beat Eric with all his might. Meanwhile, Sadi's friends were talking. "Listen, don't you think he's starting to lose? Sure, he has the advantage now, but before that..." "Shut up, I saw everything." But this conversation is pointless now. Foxy, like everyone else, came to watch the beating of the newcomer, but now she finds our hero very interesting. Among the spectators, the opinion began to spread that Satami is not as strong as everyone thinks he is. Only Steve silently watched everything that was happening. After all, he was the only one who had seen Eric in combat. However, he was still haunted by one thought. What happened to our hero when he fainted in the alley? After all, people don't become like that just like that. And at some point, Steve realized that his words were true. Initially, he said this only to provoke Samurai and compel him to test our hero. However, observing the situation, he realized that the image of a harmless nerd was indeed just a disguise. The Eric we see now is the real Eric. Fast, smart, and eager to fight. In this fight, he looked confident and ready to fight from the very first minute. The only factor that could have caused our hero to lose was his lack of combat experience. He more than made up for it with his intelligence and agility. So another attack ended with Eric's counterattack. The tester noticed that after each attack, our hero always weakened his defense, and he used these moments for his own attacks. At that moment, Steve approached his sister and took her by the shoulder. Then, with a broad smile, he asked, "What do you think of this guy? What do you want to hear?" "I'm glad I wasn't wrong. He's demonstrating the skills shown in Reapel," Irin replied irritably. "Why are you always so angry? I just wanted to thank you for finding him," Steve added, taking out his phone. "Okay, watch closely or you'll miss the most interesting part. And by the way, I think we can get the code," Steve said in a whisper, causing his sister to look genuinely surprised. Meanwhile, Satami beat Eric so badly that our hero couldn't stand on his feet. To be fair, he was barely holding on himself. Just like last time, Eric lay beaten on the floor in a pool of his own blood. Seeing this, Irene said, "Brother, you rushed it. Maybe next time." "Wait, what did you say?" Steve shouted excitedly. "Since he lost, let's aim for another one," the guy added. But a second later, the excited smile disappeared from Steve's face. "Irene, is he really out?" "I bet my monthly allowance on him," the guy added sadly. "What did you just say?" the girl shouted in surprise. "Steve, that's the dumbest decision you've ever made. What are we going to do now?" Irin shouted angrily. Suddenly, through the loud ringing in his ears, Eric heard someone shouting his name. A second later, he came to his senses. Opening his eyes, the guy saw Irin looking worriedly at him, trying to figure out if he was okay. Looking around, Eric said in a trembling voice, "What happened?" "Don't worry. He's an experienced fighter. You just need to rest a little," Irin replied in a caring and gentle voice. "What are you talking about? What happened to me?" our hero asked, confused. "If you're talking about the test, you failed," the girl replied. "I see. Interesting," Eric whispered thoughtfully. But then Irin hit him on the back of the head, and she said angrily, "You don't even have the basics. But since you managed to do that, well done. To be honest, even I didn't really believe in you. If you wanted to praise me, you didn't have to hit me," our hero replied with a slight smile. "Irene, where's Steve?" Eric asked, looking around. A little annoyed, the girl replied, "I don't know, but I just yelled at him. But for some reason, I think he's talking to the Satis right now. My brother isn't the type to give up easily. Maybe he wants to arrange a retest for you," Irin added. Sitting on the cold floor, Eric felt his whole body shaking. But it wasn't because of fear or pain. It was because of a wild desire to fight again. All this time, Foxy was watching Eric closely. Even the fact that he had lost did not bother her. The girl still felt that there was something in him that had not yet been fully revealed. Suddenly, the roar of motorcycles rang out. "Foxy, hurry up! You know we're late, right?" Even though she didn't have time to get to know our hero better right now, she decided to watch him for a while longer. Meanwhile, Sati's friends were discussing the fight and how much money they had made from it. Suddenly, one of them had the sense to say, "To be honest, at one point I thought you were going to lose." Unable to tolerate such insolence, Satomi shouted, "Shut up and get out of here!" Sammy knew from the very beginning that he would win this fight, and that's what happened. But he didn't like the way he got this victory. "I remember the fight. The guy realized that he was very wrong when he thought Eric was a pushover. What's more, Satomi realized that if our hero had a little more combat experience, he would have lost this fight. Suddenly, Steve's voice came from behind him. "Hey, Satomi, are you okay? You look like something's wrong," the guy added with a sly smile. "Steve, are you done with what you need?" Satomi asked. "Nothing, just wanted to know when you can retest him," Steve replied. Wiping the blood from his cheek, Satomi said irritably, "Enough." "Why do you need that? You don't have to win to get a pass," the guy added suspiciously. "Wait, are you saying he passed the test?" Steve exclaimed in surprise. "I don't know, I'm still thinking about it. I may be a bastard, but I have a clear view of the world and am honest with myself. He beat me up pretty badly too. I didn't even get to taste victory," Samadhi said thoughtfully. Steve sensed that the tester was having doubts. Then he took out his phone and showed Satomi something that could work in Eric's favor. It was a recording of Eric from a test battle in Reapel when he defeated Feeder. "You see, that stranger everyone was looking for is my baby," Steve whispered with a sly smile. "I know it's hard to believe, but take a closer look at his movements and remember your fight." As much as Satan wanted it to be a lie, the facts were undeniable. It was him. During the fight with our hero, the tester also noticed something very strange. At the moment when Eric read the movement and went on the counterattack, he had such a terrifying look on his face, as if he was ready to tear Satan to pieces and send him straight to hell. Fortunately for him, E overreached and didn't manage to land a proper blow. No one understood what had happened, so everyone thought that Satomi had knocked him out and declared him the winner. Although he won formally, if Eric had been able to deliver the final blow, the Satans would not have had a chance. Therefore, the tester approved our hero to participate in the Colosseum. Everything happened as planned, but Steve had one more small request for the guy. He wanted Satomi to keep the code and all information about Eric secret for a while. And we fast forward a few hours to the outskirts of the city, to an abandoned warehouse. This space is usually used by a small construction company to store unnecessary building materials. Today, this remote place will become a little more interesting. Some students from different schools received the same message. "I'll be waiting for you at the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Date and time." Kabi and Anthony, whom we already know well, received the same message. As soon as the guys went inside, a shout came from the darkness. "Can you keep it down? I'm a little busy here with Renya-chan," added the voice from the darkness. The hooligans knew this voice well, so Anthony shouted, "Otaku! Did you call us here?" "Who told you I'm Otaku, curly-haired boy?" replied the stranger. At that moment, a huge guy with glasses and a doll in his hands emerged from the darkness. "Guys, my name is Jasimi, and I'm from Suam High School. I assume you also received a mysterious message," asked Jasimi. "I don't care who you are, I'm going to beat the crap out of you anyway," Anthony shouted, clenching his fists. Of course, after those words, a fight was inevitable. Before we continue, I want you to know that Anthony is about 185 centimeters tall and weighs 90 kilograms. And yet, compared to Jasimi, he looked like a small fry. "God, you're so fat. I'm afraid that after I knock you out, there will be an earthquake," Anthony said through laughter. "Are you all so funny at the Poramsan school?" I replied to Jasimi with a smile. At that moment, a few more guys entered the warehouse, and Kabi realizes that the mysterious message was just a trap, but something still didn't add up in his head. Their school had never had any problems with Suam's school, so why did they drive them here? Realizing that something was wrong, Kabi whispered, "Anthony, I think we'd better just leave now." "To hell with you and your doll!" Anthony suddenly shouted, snatching the Jasimi doll. It was a rare figure from the game and very fragile, so its head broke when it fell. In this way, the boy wanted to provoke Jasimi into a fight. But why? Honestly, it doesn't matter. After what happened to his doll, Jasimi literally went crazy. Anthony achieved his goal, and they simultaneously delivered a powerful right-handed blow to each other. Meanwhile, outside, 3 more people arrived. They were all dressed in the same uniform of a well-known team, and it was they who sent the text message to all the hooligans waiting inside. Meanwhile, the point between Anthony and Jasimi was in full swing. The guys underestimated each other and were fighting on almost equal terms. But then the walls of the damp hangar were filled with loud applause. "Guys, that's enough! Keep going and I'll finish you off myself!" A gentle female voice rang out. Turning around, the hooligans saw 3 people wearing masks. "Now that you've calmed down, it's time to talk. We've gathered unranked players from Swam and Purumsan high schools. And to be honest, I really like you guys. You fight like girls, added the girl in the mask. Not understanding what was going on, the hooligans began shouting questions one after another. Who are you? Why are we here? But they didn't hear a single answer. Instead, the strangers went inside, looking closely at everyone present. Suddenly, Kabi whispered, Carte, I think I know who they are. Look at their jackets. They're definitely from San Migo High School. And their logo on the back. They're definitely from the Coliseum clan, the Black Mamba. There was no reason to doubt his friend's guess, and that made Anthony even more scared. It took the rest of the guys a little longer, but they didn't quite figure out who had called them here. And then, the tense silence was broken by a single, loud laugh. After that, one of the guys said loudly, They say the Black Mamba are real idiots. Funny, I've heard that rumor too, replied the girl in the black jacket. I don't care what you heard, I'm not going to listen to some girl, added the guy. After that, quite predictably, he got what he deserved. The girl damaged his respiratory tract with one precise blow to the neck, and her strength was enough to knock a guy twice her size to the floor. As you may have guessed, this mysterious masked stranger is Foxy. For such insolent words directed at her clan, the girl punished the guy by breaking his nose with her foot. When she was done with him, Foxy shouted loudly, Friends, don't you think too highly of yourselves? I'll give you some advice for the future. If you're weak, shut your mouth and keep quiet when the strong are talking. After seeing this, no one else wanted to challenge the members of the Black Mamba. The Black Mamba clan is a large team that controls about 70% of the high schools in the Kangbuk district. Rumor has it that Fafa TV is full of monsters. Among them are the seniors of Samyeonsil High School, where the clan was formed. They are highly ranked players with a good reputation who are recognized throughout Seoul. Looking at the faces of the invited guests, Foxy realized that they had guessed who they were dealing with. After resolving the unpleasant situation, the girl thanked the guys for coming when she called them. It came as a real surprise to Kabi and Anthony that it was actually Black Mamba who had called them, not Jasimi. And they weren't the only ones who thought so. The rest of the guys felt the same way. Let's get down to business. We didn't call you here to fight. So I hope everyone will take this seriously. As you probably already know, Fafa TV will soon be holding a distribution exam. And there's a rumor that a problem child will be there. According to our information, this is not a rumor at all, said Foxy. But then one of the guys interrupted her and asked, A problem child? How is that related to the placement exam? I don't understand it either. Our school isn't the kind of place where there are people like that. We only have nerds, added Kabi in surprise. I apologize for interrupting you, but who are you talking about? Jasimi asked anxiously. We don't have any exact information, but he's at one of your schools. However, we know what he looks like. You know him, don't you? Foxy said, taking out her phone and showing a photo of Eric's gaming avatar. In general, the main purpose of this meeting was to find people for specific purposes. Thanks to her connections, Foxy was able to find out that the newcomer she was interested in was most likely studying at Swam or Puramsan School. She had the highest hopes for Jasimi and Anthony as the strongest representatives of the schools. The day after their deal. After school, Eric went back to Riepel. But this time, it wasn't just to attend classes. Today, he was undergoing training specially prepared by Steve. In this training session, our hero must learn spatial maneuverable combat. And for the best results, Irin joined him in the lobby. Suddenly, Steve said, Eric, you need to skip school for a while, so focus on your training. What? But why? Our hero asked excitedly. Don't worry about it, everything's taken care of, just train, Steve replied. Just as Eric was about to ask a few more questions, Irin began to attack. Surprisingly, the guy had enough reflexes and agility to dodge such an unexpected blow. Irene was pleasantly surprised because it meant that Eric was improving as a fighter. Her main goal was to give our hero as much combat experience as possible, so that in the Coliseum he could show his best side. But so far, he keeps repeating the same mistakes. Constantly dodging attacks, he allows his opponent to corner him, and Irene believes that this is his main mistake. In the end, everything came to the expected conclusion. Our hero backed himself into a corner, and this led to defeat. Stopping her foot a few centimeters from the guy's head, Irene said, there's just over a month left until the placement exam, and if you don't correct your mistakes, you won't pass it. And if you want to get the money according to the contract, you have to do it. But Eric knew this very well himself, so he was ready to train all his free time. Suddenly, their training was interrupted by an unexpected message from Steve. I don't want to distract you, but we have a huge problem. People on the forums are actively trying to find out your real identity. By the way, since you don't have a gaming nickname, they've given you the nickname BERSERK. However, the problem is that someone found out which school you attend. What alarmed Steve about this whole situation was that Eric had only been a member of their clan for a few days, and yet so much was already known about him. He had no doubt that the Black Mamba clan was behind it all, and Steve, as the clan leader, had to ensure the safety of his team. After thinking about it, the guy realized that Foxy was able to track down the approximate location of the first entry into the game. The thing was, this so-called hunt was holding Eric back in terms of training. Steve knew that something like this would happen sooner or later, so they conduct all their training on exclusive devices that are connected to a wired network. In this case, it would be practically impossible to track even the approximate location of the connection. To improve his combat experience, Eric undergoes hand-to-hand combat training. He studies various game cards and how they can be used. And in the real world, he is constantly building up his physical strength and endurance. To be honest, the schedule is incredibly tight, and not everyone can withstand such training. But Steve saw potential in Eric and knew that in a month they could turn him into an above-average fighter. All this is only a small part of Steve's grand plan. With the help of Eric and Erin, he wanted to take over Fafa TV, all for the sake of revenge on a guy named Tavan. The next morning at school, every morning began with the homeroom teacher checking attendance, and today was no exception. When it was our hero's turn, the class was silent. When the teacher asked where Eric was, his classmates said that he was sick or had gone crab fishing to earn money. But no one knew the real reason for our hero's absence. Even Mark, his best friend, didn't know why Eric was skipping school. The guy just hoped that his friend was okay and that he hadn't gotten into any trouble. Meanwhile, Anthony and Cabby were thinking about Foxy's words. Although the girl had not presented any evidence that BERSERK attended their school, they had no reason not to believe her. Besides, the bully's task was not only to find out BERSERK's true identity, but also to eliminate him before the placement exam. Foxy promised a place in the Black Mamba clan to whoever successfully completed this task. Anthony and Cabby came up with a plan to find the person they were looking for. They were going to find the berserker in the game and get all the information out of him. But they weren't the only ones who had thought of this. The other guys were also going to find him in Reaple. Meanwhile, the first rank of Fafa TV, the placement exam, begins. Today is an important day for the clan, and especially for Eric. Today is the day he will enter the Coliseum for the first time. Thanks to Steve finding out that they were looking for him, Eric knew that a real bloodbath awaited him. Nevertheless, he couldn't wait to do it. Before connecting, our hero remembered Mark's words and his warning. However, after everything he had done and all the training, Eric couldn't just give up. During his training, our hero realized that for the past 2 years, he had been justifying himself with his past. This was because of his fear that he was incapable of anything but games. However, people appeared, friends, who accept him for who he is. For their sake and for himself, Eric cast aside his past as one frame. Now he is a completely different person, strong and confident. Now he is berserk. Approaching our hero, Steve said, "The main thing is not to get nervous, but I'll tell you right now, there will be many who will specifically target you. They want to eliminate a strong competitor. But remember that you can benefit from any situation." After receiving these words of advice, Eric got involved. The strongest fear a person has is the fear of the unknown. And most of all, our hero feared that someone would attack him from the very first seconds of connecting. But everything turned out completely differently than he expected. Host's voice. "Hello, everyone. I am glad to welcome our cruel friends back after such a long time. As always, I am your host at the Coliseum and your best friend, Orca. Although, as always, you don't care. The Coliseum welcomes its gladiators. Just kidding. I'm not some boring TV host. Today, you pigs will fight in a colossal slaughter. I hope you all die. Ha 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 ha! Now I will tell you the rules that you must remember. If you don't remember them and break them, don't complain that you won't get a refund. If you enter the portal that passes through each room, you will move around a random map. Inside, there is an official map of the Colosseum, which is most often used during FAFA TV broadcasts. Each room has different missions, so check them carefully. It's up to you whether you knock someone down or fall into a trap. Even at the end, you may have an additional battle. Only the 20 survivors can reach rank F. However, if you avoid attacking enemies for 1 hour, you can disappear along with the map. Keep that in mind. In addition, this time there is someone here who is attracting a lot of attention. Dear Scum, here he is. Please give him a warm welcome. The newcomer BERSERK, who has caused a sensation all over the internet. The orc suddenly shouted, pointing his fingers at Eric. Now the goal of all these hooligans is to beat up our hero and win the title of BERSERK champion. Steve had prepared Eric for something like this, but the guy still hoped it wouldn't happen. But this could work in his favor, as many sponsors have come here today. If he impresses them, they will finance him. That's not all. Orca announced that the person who could defeat the Berserker would receive extra points and a guaranteed chance to get an F rank. If anyone had any doubts about hunting our hero before, with these words, the host painted a target on Eric's forehead. At that moment, our hero whispered, "What the hell? Why did he single me out among everyone else? I barely won, and the Satami lost completely. How am I supposed to fight all of them at once?" Irene, who was watching the broadcast at the time, was also not thrilled with the attention given to Eric. Steve, on the other hand, was happy. He believed that this would make it easier to put the plan into reality. In any case, whatever happened in the Colosseum, they would not be able to help. Following an old tradition, Orca organized a small reception before the start of the trial. But for several years in a row, during this reception, the participants have started fighting, and many have been eliminated prematurely. Therefore, this year, the reception lasted only a minute. After that, the exam began. As soon as the signal sounded to start the test, chaos broke out in the arena. The participants began attacking each other indiscriminately. Among them were some more clever guys who immediately headed for the exits. In just a few seconds, Orc counted more than 5 fallen participants. However, one participant stood out among them all. He moved around the arena incredibly fast, like lightning. This participant was our hero, BERSERK. On his way to one of the portals, Eric even managed to land several very successful attacks, which earned him a few points. At the moment, he tops the leaderboard. But not everything is so rosy and simple. Eric is not the only participant whose speed is at a very high level. At this moment, our hero was caught up by another promising newcomer, who was nicknamed Meteor. The guy didn't know about him, so he was very surprised when he saw that someone had caught up with him. Catching up with Eric, this stranger looked at him as if he were his worst enemy and said, "So you're BERSERK? I'm disappointed." Then, with insane speed and strength, he attacked Eric. Meteor's speed was so high that our hero didn't even have time to see the leg flying towards him. Looking at this red-haired guy, Eric had only one question. Who is he? During training, Steve often repeated one phrase. 99% of the participants are high school students who know how to fight a little, and they are no competition for you. But let's get back to reality. A little over 30 seconds into the test, Eric is already bleeding profusely. Thanks to a month of hard training, he was able to withstand the blow and not pass out. Our hero soberly assessed his abilities and realized that he had little chance in a fight with this guy. Suddenly, Meteor said, "So, you don't know how to fight? Rumor has it that you'll fight like your nickname, BERSERK, suggests. But I look into your eyes and see that you're afraid of me. You're not like them, so what are you doing here?" "Don't answer, I understand everything. You came here to make money like all of them. I'll give you some advice. Just leave before it's too late. When we meet again, I won't go easy on you," Meteor added, then entered the portal. What had just happened was a real shock to Eric. He didn't expect to find someone like that. Just as he was about to think about it, someone shouted, "Hey, there's a portal!" Now a whole crowd of angry hooligans was running towards our hero. Without a moment's hesitation, Eric followed the stranger into the portal. This time the guy spared him, but our hero had no doubt that this would not be their last encounter in this exam. As you already understand, portals transport participants to different worlds. And if you enter one portal, it's not a given that you'll end up in the same world. The map Eric found himself on was familiar to him thanks to Steve's training. This map is called Sprint. Of the more than 100 people who entered the portal after our hero, only about 15 people ended up on this map. The mission on this map was one of the most brutal. It was called Battle Royale. Only 2 people who survive this slaughter will advance to the next stage. In addition, this mission has a certain time limit. Suddenly, a guy stepped forward and shouted loudly, "Enough talk about this and that. In the end, don't we just need to beat each other up and win? Since you're all such cowards, I'll start first. And I'll start with BERSERK," added the guy, attacking Eric from behind. But our hero sensed the enemy's approach in time. Since the attack was stupid and primitive, he simply stepped aside, allowing his opponent to pass. At the same time, the stranger accidentally stepped on the acceleration panel, and in a second, he was rushing at full speed into the wall. The force of the collision was so great that the system counted him out. From the moment of the first death, the Battle Royale counter was activated, and the participants began to act. If you step on the yellow panel, your speed will double, which is very dangerous. And if you step on the red tile, you will stop, so it's a safe and easy map. Among the participants, there were guys who knew this map as well as our hero. One of the guys even used the yellow panel to launch a surprise, lightning-fast attack. But this acceleration was still not enough to catch Eric. The guy literally saw all of his opponent's attacks in advance and easily dodged them. At one point, it even seemed to him that he was mocking him. In the end, this attacker repeated the fate of his predecessor and accidentally stepped on the yellow panel. As a result, he crashed into the wall and was eliminated from the test. Eric found it strange that 2 guys made the same mistake. But that wasn't the end of it. After the failure of the 2 guys, a third attacked our hero. After training with Steve and Irin and battling the Satans, these guys seemed harmless to him because they swung their fists without thinking. And in this, Steve had a huge advantage. He was good at using his brain. Instead of getting involved in senseless fights and wasting his strength, he decided to take advantage of the map's features. He pushed all his enemies onto the yellow panels so that they would crash into the walls and be knocked out. In addition, the Colosseum system was designed in such a way that it counted victories over these participants as berserkers. Smelling the strong scent of blood, Eric felt it, a wild urge to destroy all his opponents. And at that moment, that very creepy smile appeared on his face, the one that made him so famous. Seeing how easily our hero was defeating one opponent after another, some guy was about to attack him, but a stranger stopped him. Then he threw him against the wall. They all forgot the main rule. Everyone around them was an enemy, not just BERSERK. Realizing their mistake, the participants began to fight each other. Most of them decided to push their opponents onto the panels to conserve energy. In a matter of seconds, chaos filled the arena. And yet there were individuals who wanted to defeat BERSERK to get a guaranteed spot. When the exam was just beginning, Eric was unsure, so he was afraid. But now he has no thoughts of losing. The Berserker threw one participant after another out, thus confidently taking the lead. Even the host Orc, who drew everyone's attention to our hero, did not expect this. But that made it even more interesting. The FAFA TV broadcast broke its own record for viewership. Everyone was curious to see how the rising star BERSERK would achieve absolute superiority. For many, it was a real revelation that BERSERK actually uses his mind in battle rather than brute force, as one would expect from a player with such a nickname. Now, the main thing is that this feeling of absolute superiority doesn't go to Eric's head, and that he doesn't lose his vigilance at the crucial moment. Watching our hero, one of the guys froze in fear. After all, before his very eyes, a skinny guy in a black cloak had beaten up two of the strongest guys in his school. What are the chances that such a weakling could stand up to a berserker? That's right, absolutely none. Realizing that he didn't stand a chance in an attack, this guy stood on the slowdown panel and took a defensive position so that he could repel his opponent's attack if necessary. But he didn't come up with this strategy himself, he just copied it from our hero. Eric didn't attack anyone himself, he just stood there and waited. At least, that's what he did until a certain moment. But when no one wanted to attack him, he decided to take action. In just a couple of minutes, the battle royale was over. Eric and the guy who had been defending himself the whole time moved on to the next level. Feeling the threat from the berserker, this guy ran to the portal without hesitation as soon as it opened. Meanwhile, Eric just stood there, breathing heavily. After an attack of so-called thirst, he always has a headache. Because of this, he couldn't fight at full strength for a while. But if that happened now, it would mean defeat for our hero. So he allowed rage to completely fill his body and mind. Releasing his true nature, Eric took on the true appearance of a berserker, with terrifying eyes and a frightening smile. Meanwhile, most of the players moved on to the second level and found themselves on a new map. Welcome to the Circus Festival map. If you don't know all the extensive patterns that come out of the box in the middle, this can be considered the most difficult F-rank map. Quite a few participants came to the second level, even more than planned. There were also even participants from other countries, like this girl named Morticia. Some players have been on this map for more than 5 minutes, but the competition has not yet started. Some participants spent this time studying each other and finding out what each of them was capable of. Jashimi also managed to get through to the second stage, and he spent the break time looking for the berserker, but he was unable to find him. When suddenly an announcement was made. The last participant has joined, and all eyes turned towards the portal. As you might have guessed, the last participant was our hero. Many were unhappy that they got to the second stage with the berserker, and due to his sickly appearance, someone even suggested that he had received serious injuries in the first stage. And apparently only Jashimi was sincerely glad that he was here. All this time, the mortician simply stood to the side and silently watched. The second stage was a little more interesting than the first. Those who can last more than 10 minutes on this map will advance to the third stage. As soon as the timer started counting down, the gift box began to swell. And after a few seconds, a huge clown on a spring appeared from it, like in old toys. Seeing such a large enemy, most of the participants were simply at a loss, not knowing what to do. For the first few seconds, the clown simply stared motionlessly at all the participants, when suddenly his gaze stopped on the guy who stood alone to the side. And in just a moment, this scarecrow completely focused its attention on the poor fellow. And of course, for him, this was a surprise. And trying to somehow correct the situation, he tried to measure it, but it didn't lead to anything good. He hit the clown with all his might and shouted through his laughter, "Out!" When suddenly someone shouted, "The slab! It changed color! Why is it blue?" You must understand one more important point. You can fail this test not only at the hands of a clown, but also at the hands of other participants. And whoever knew about it began to act immediately. Even passing all the tests does not give you any guarantee that you will get into the Colosseum. Evaluation criterion is the points you earn. If you don't get enough, you'll quickly be dismissed. And the fastest and most effective way to earn points is to knock out other players. It all comes down to the fact that at each stage, the participants need to fight each other. And Morticia showed herself to be quite good in battles. Her fighting abilities were much higher than most of those present. Moreover, she never attacked first, but only waited for the enemy to come to her. This girl chose the best tactic: surveillance and analysis. In the very first seconds of the test, she paid attention to only 2 people, Eric and Jashimi. Surprisingly, it is true that in just a few seconds, Jashimi completely gained the upper hand over our hero, and all because he surpasses him in every metric except speed. But even so, he is still incredibly fast. Having delivered a couple of powerful blows, the guy thought that he had defeated the berserker and fulfilled the mission of the Black Mamba. And he had every reason to do so, because he held the barely breathing body of our hero in his arms. Watching this, Irina couldn't understand what was happening, but Steve remained calm, knowing what would happen next. Our hero has an unusual ability. After a defeat, he gains a second wind. At that moment, the seemingly defenseless berserker said through laughter, "What an idiot, that was painful. I'm sorry, but will you take your hand off me? Or do you want to die, you stupid pig?" Our hero added with a wild grin. After these words, Jashimi began to beat him even harder. As he landed blow after blow, the guy said, "I saw the footage of you playing coercion. Even though you looked like a newbie who didn't even have any gaming skills, you covered it with basic skills and reaction speed. All people admire this skill, but not me." At that time, that player was at a professional level. but it was such a big event that he later retired. But do you know what the main problem is? I used to be called an esports genius too, because a similar situation happened. Trust me, they'll quickly forget about you because it was just an accident, Jashimi added, beating our hero. Poor pig, you turn out to be such a wretch, Eric said, full of arrogance. What? I'm better than you, the guy answered, confused. But in response, he only received a powerful kick. Jashimi was not like everyone else, despite his stupid appearance. He knew how to use his head. But thanks to the destabilization of the enemy and a couple of clever moves, Eric was able to escape from his grip. Now it's difficult to say which of them is stronger, because each has its own advantages. Listen, fatty, everything you said even made me a little nervous. But just because you've lost your nerve doesn't mean others are as weak as you, Berserker said unexpectedly. Attack! And I'll show you the difference in our strength, our hero added, her eyes wild. From these words, Jashimi awakened in himself a long-forgotten feeling of anger. And a moment later, the battle arena was filled with a loud explosion, after which a system notification appeared about the addition of new slabs. Now, in place of the lonely blue slab, a multitude of multicolored panels appeared on the field, and this caused concern among some participants. Let's just say that if you don't know the patterns of this map, then your chances of passing it are close to zero. Those guys who knew what was about to happen began to behave as carefully as possible. Meanwhile, Eric was beating Jashimi in a mocking manner. At that moment, the guy realized why Berserker had attracted so much attention. His abilities were much higher than he had imagined. However, despite this, Jashimi considered Eric an idiot, because he succumbed to the desires of sponsors and spectators. He was sure that the guy was doing all this just to make money, missing the main point of the Colosseum. The guy sincerely believed that the true essence of the Colosseum was to surpass everyone in physical strength. Of course, it was convenient for him to believe this. After all, he was much stronger than all his peers. That's why the fight with the Berserker was a real revelation for him. He did not possess striking physical strength, but he had many other advantages and still occupied a leading position. When suddenly Eric stopped and suggested a little test of wits. Meanwhile, there were exactly 3 minutes left until the end of the second stage, and this meant that the clown was entering a special mode of total destruction. Jashimi knew this map well enough to understand what would happen next. Seeing the horror on his opponent's face, Eric said, "Didn't you know about the 3 minutes?" After which our hero jumped back onto the purple panel and playfully waved his hand. And just a second later, the clown, like a madman, began to hit the players one after another with his hammer. Many people who were unaware of the hidden patterns of the map fell under this attack. You may have just seen the culmination of the circus festival card, the fanfare pattern. After the fanfare sounds, you need to stand on a slab of the same color as the clown's eyes. And despite the fact that Jashimi didn't have time to react, he still remained in the game thanks to his skill. Breathing heavily, the guy shouted, "Did you want to win in such a cowardly way?" Cowardly? I was playing by the rules of the game. Where's the cowardice in that? There's no need to blame your own weakness on someone else's cowardice or anything else. Just accept it as a fact, Eric replied sarcastically. Unable to bear yet another insult directed at him, Jashimi rushed to the attack, shouting that he was stronger than him because the Black Mamba had chosen him. "I am the strongest fighter in Swam High School. A worthless person like you even dares to say such words to someone like me. You will answer for this," Jashimi shouted, trying to hit our hero, when suddenly the fanfare started playing again. And the clown changed the color of his eyes again. The guy had heard about this pattern before, but had never encountered it. So the repeated fanfare came as a surprise. However, thanks to the information he received from Eric, he now knew what to do. The only problem was that you had to act with lightning speed. Otherwise, you would come under attack. Trying to find a panel of the right color nearby, Jashimi saw that our hero had already done this and would not let him near the right panel. However, he didn't have time to look for a new panel. So the girl decided to take a risk and knock out the Berserker. And at that moment, Eric left the panel on his own, letting his opponent onto the red plate. Irina didn't see Eric fight with the bullies at his school, when suddenly our hero said, "Idiot! I thought I'd reveal all my cards to you." With 30 seconds remaining, the final pattern appears. Since it appears randomly, you need to watch it very carefully. The final fanfares differ from the usual ones in sound and especially in pattern. What do you think will happen if you step on the wrong color tile? Eric added with a smile. Hearing the sound of a flying hammer behind him, Jashimi cried out in despair, "Impossible!" That's why this card is considered the most difficult. It has many complex patterns and deceptions. Watching as the hammer reduced his opponent to nothing, the most terrifying smile imaginable appeared on Eric's face. Watching the live broadcast, Irina also screamed in surprise. "What is this?" I understand how he completed the sprint and circus maps. After all, he trained hard with you. However, the girl screamed, slamming her hand on the table in anger. Isn't it strange, these movements of his? During training, he moved completely differently. It felt like he had become a completely different person, Irina added in a calm voice. But Steve remained silent in response. After all, he knew what that look meant. Irina didn't see Eric fight with the bullies at his school. That's why she doesn't know about Eric's second personality. She only saw his unsuccessful fight against Satami. Steve himself didn't have it all figured out yet enough to explain it to her now. So he decided to explain himself when the moment was right. Watching Eric, Irin realized that our hero was not fighting her at full strength. Meanwhile, on other maps, a real massacre was taking place. The participants fought with all their might, and every minute someone dropped out. In addition, many athletes who had high expectations failed in large numbers and lost their places in the rankings. But for the show, it was even better. With each passing minute, the audience grew larger and larger. After completing the second stage, the portal to the third stage did not appear. This could only mean one thing. The other participants were still competing in the second stage. For Eric, it was a great opportunity to relax and think a little. Considering that almost everyone failed the second stage, it meant that in the next stage, Eric would meet serious opponents. But our hero didn't care about that. He was more concerned with the words of the Jashimi, that he was hired by the Black Mamba, and to the fool. It is clear that the Black Mamba wants to eliminate him, but the reason for this is still unknown. In any case, you need to be careful. When suddenly Eric said, "Why hasn't the portal opened yet? The education ended a few minutes ago." "It won't open anytime soon, amigo," a female voice suddenly sounded. Turning around, our hero saw a Morticia, who was simply standing leaning against the wall. "My name is Morticia. I'm from Mexico," the stranger said, trying to sound friendly. Eric was surprised that someone else besides him was able to survive. "Since I have nothing better to do, I want to say that you fight quite interestingly," the mortician whispered with a smile, after which it suddenly began to run towards our hero as if it was going to attack him. "And if you were with a Ford, I would have removed you from it immediately, so to speak, because of the image you showed during the recent battle. My opinion has changed a little, but don't think I consider you a serious opponent. You're just interesting," Morticia whispered. "In any case, you also came here to become an F-rank player. Of course, it's not my style, but I don't want us to be rivals. So I propose we form an alliance at the next stage. What do you say?" the girl added, extending her hand. At first glance, Morticia looked like she could be trusted. However, Eric understood that this could end badly for him. That's why he was in no hurry to accept or reject her offer. When suddenly Morticia said, "Even though I am Mexican, I have lived my whole life in Korea. I study at Hwajong High School. And you, I assume, are BERSERKer. Your real name is a secret. Let it remain so," the girl added, trying to appear friendly. And a moment later, our hero answered in an angry voice, "No! My answer is no! BERSERKer, but why?" "I'm happy," the mortician said, confused. Eric previously thought that forming an alliance with a strong player was a good idea. But now there's a risk that Morticia is a member of the Black Mamba. Although there's no evidence of this, it's not worth the risk. In this situation, Eric has no need for any alliance. When suddenly the arena was filled with the host's voice. "Friends, can you hear me?" Just now, everyone finished the second stage, and I must say it was amazing. "You guys are great! You created a real massacre!" There are only 43 participants left. This is significantly more than in previous years. And this means that there are really cool fighters among you. But don't get cocky, you're still scum. Besides, I won't be broadcasting anymore. But before I leave you, I'll take you to the final stage. The final map is the place everyone's been waiting for. At this moment, all the spectators froze in anticipation, and only those who watched Fafa TV from the very beginning understood what map we were talking about. This map was one of the first in the collision to have the concept of one-on-one duels. There are no patterns or traps on this map. Everything is decided by a fair fight. Having learned about the final stage, Steve began to get a little nervous, because Eric's success would depend only on him. And the map for the final test was called Celestial Collision. However, there are a few new features this year, since this map was originally intended for one-on-one battles. Among those who remain, there are those who have stars engraved on their hands. The top 10 surviving players with the most money bet on them have a star. Those who don't have a star can take it from those who do. The one who reaches the very end with a star wins. Moreover, it is possible to own multiple stars at once. What does this mean? That there will not necessarily be exactly 10 winners. Even if a player has a star, he can knock out his opponents. You need to be extremely careful. Well, all participants are familiar with the rules of the final test, which means we can begin. As soon as the orca announced the start of the final round, chaos reigned in the arena. Of course, the main targets were the star participants. And Eric, too. 3 fighters attacked him at once, but they were all too self-confident. And they paid for it. Thanks to Steve Irene's training, our hero feels confident in combat with several opponents at once. However, this was quite tiring for him. Even though most of the opponents seemed quite weak, Eric still treated them with caution. Well, looking around again, our hero thinks that perhaps he is being too cautious, and in fact he has no reason for such behavior. And all this time, the mortician simply observed him from the sidelines. She was genuinely interested in how Eric would perform in such a test, because there is literally a target painted on his face, when suddenly 2 guys who had made an alliance started approaching the girl. And apparently, they chose Morticia as their target. However, that's not entirely true. The girl didn't have a star. Because she was a foreigner, no one bet on her. So the guys decided to attack the Berserker, to guarantee their place in the top 10. The attacker was very quiet and stealthy, so Eric noticed the attack only at the moment of impact. Luckily, he had enough skill to repel the enemy's attack. Moreover, the guy noticed that there was a star on the attacker's hand, and he did not understand why he was attacking him. So the rumors about you turned out to be true? You're pretty fast, the stranger said indifferently. At that moment, Eric thought that this stranger was working for the Black Mamba. Although there was no evidence of this, the guy was practically sure of it. He just didn't see the point in a star player attacking another star player. Thinking that this guy was a Black Mamba agent, Eric began to fight him with full force. And in just a few successful combinations, our hero gained absolute superiority over his opponent. He dealt blow after blow, while his opponent's fists flew centimeters past him. And even so, the guy was still standing on his feet and could fight. Because of this, Eric began to doubt that his blows had reached their target. However, he had no time to think. The enemy went on the attack. This stranger's fighting style was somewhat similar to Jishimi's, only the blows were faster and much stronger. But even so, our hero dodged quite successfully, until the guy pinned his leg, thereby immobilizing Eric and delivering an incredibly powerful blow to his chest. Then followed a lightning-fast combination of hooks, and the final knee strike to the stomach. Coughing up blood, Eric remembered where he was and what he was doing, and that everyone here was incredibly dangerous. But the attack didn't stop there. Waiting for the right moment, the blonde's partner snuck up behind Eric and grabbed him. And by that time, several participants with stars had already dropped out of the challenge. And if our hero doesn't figure out how to escape the grip, he'll be next. At that moment, he realized that he had done something stupid. He didn't think that anyone would team up at the final stage, so he didn't expect to be grabbed by someone else. The enemy was superior to him in physical strength, so he would not be able to escape from the force grip. When suddenly the blonde said, "Your offensive attacks are definitely quite ferocious. However you dodge, too much I rely only on my vision. Besides, it's obvious you're a newbie who's only learned a few moves in a short time. Can't you handle even a battle like this without any special rules?" the stranger added. But then the partner interrupted him and said angrily, "Come on, hurry up, I need this damn star too. He's not nervous anyway, he's still trapped. And to you, Berserker, thank you very much. Today we are members of the Black Mamba clan," the blonde added, waving his fist. "That's it. It's impossible to escape this grip, and the enemy's fist is just centimeters away. And we are transported to school. No one had seen Eric for over a month, and it seemed like no one cared. No one except Mark. The guy even went to a friend's house, but there was no one there, so he just continued living his life. But then, the most ordinary day began to take a very interesting turn. Mark noticed how his classmates were watching something and discussing it very heatedly. Trying to find out what they were watching, the guy froze in horror. He saw a live broadcast on FAFA TV where his best friend was. Meanwhile, Irina gave her brother a real nightmare. The girl scolded Steve for letting the poorly prepared Eric take part in such a dangerous test. But in response to the hysterical screams, the guy whispered in a calm voice, "Calm down. Everything will be fine." Meanwhile, our hero prepared to leave. He knew that only a miracle could save him, but the miracle did not happen. Something else, and no less interesting, happened. At the last moment, our hero was saved by a meteor. Yes, the very same guy Eric fought with at the very beginning. Those who were watching the live broadcast at that moment were in real shock. No one could understand why some stranger helped the berserker. And at that moment, Steve said in his calmest voice, "Take a closer look. I'm telling you this too late, but these are the members who were supposed to join our underdog clan." Due to Meteor's unexpected intervention, the Black Mamba mercenaries were forced to retreat immediately. These two did not expect this, because Foxy told them that the world acts alone. Moreover, our hero's ally is no ordinary person. He already has 3 stars. When suddenly the meteor said, "Hey, why did you just stand there and watch the whole time?" And Morticia, "Well, actually, I'm traumatized. Berserker rejected me, so I wanted to tease him a little," the girl replied, breaking the shoulder of the guy who grabbed Eric. "By the way, you wanted to remove the Berserker, so what changed? And Justin," the mortician added with a sly smile. "Meet Justin Berg, Osan High School, better known as the Meteor." As it turns out, Justin and Morticia are allies, and for some reason, they decided to help our hero. Now their main goal was to capture the star for the girl, and the mercenary from the That Black Mamba was the perfect candidate for this. Of course, no one would give up their star voluntarily. Now we'll see Morticia in action. When they met, the girl seemed quite capable to Eric, but he still had no idea what she was capable of in a real fight. Seeing that his opponent would be a girl, the blonde relaxed. He just didn't believe that girls could fight on the same level as boys. He was given even more confidence by the fact that Morticia did not have a star, which meant she was very spontaneous. He agreed to fight her and promised to win quickly, solely out of respect for the female sex. Having waited for what seemed to him to be the right moment, he went on the attack, but his first blow missed, as did the second and third. Watching Morticia's movements, one can tell that she is a very experienced fighter, and also incredibly fast. I would say that she is much faster than Eric. After letting her opponent mindlessly swing his fists for a while, the girl grabbed his arm and broke it, after which she said, "I'm disappointed. You talked like you had some kind of power, but you're just trash." I felt that the guy was confused. The girl continued her attack. With a powerful blow, she damaged his trachea, knocking him out of breath. This was followed by a powerful combination of kicks and elbows aimed straight at the kidneys. Morticia soberly assessed her physical capabilities, so she understood perfectly well that she did not have enough strength to knock out her opponent with one blow. Therefore, the girl concentrated all her blows on vulnerable spots, so that each blow would cause maximum damage. To be fair, if this had been a real fight, this guy would have gone to the hospital. That's how, in a matter of seconds, Morticia went from being an unknown fighter to becoming one of the favorites. Watching the girl, Eric realized that in an equal fight, he would hardly be able to oppose her with anything. It's still good that Morticia and Justin decided that Berserker is their ally. But it was too early to relax. There are still quite a lot of participants in the arena, and the stars are constantly moving from one fighter to another. Meanwhile, there are only 3 minutes left until the end of the final stage. And during this time, our hero's team just needs to hold out and not lose a single star. It's worth clarifying that voluntarily handing over stars is prohibited. You can only get a star by knocking out your opponent. Working in a team turned out to be much easier. The numerical superiority of the opponents did not feel so serious. Moreover, the attack was mainly carried out by players without stars, whose combat skills were at a very low level. It seemed like the remaining time of the trial would be the easiest 3 minutes of the entire ordeal. But one thing was nagging at Eric. Why did Morticia and Justin help him? And why did they talk to him as if they knew him? At that moment, he remembered Steva's words that everything would be fine. Eric realized that the Mexican and the Meteor were also from the Undre Dog clan. And meanwhile, there was exactly 1 minute left until the end of the test. And at that moment, another player took aim at our hero. He waited until his allies dispersed and he dropped his guard, after which he went on the attack, counting on a quick and unexpected strike. But this guy seriously underestimated the Berserker's capabilities. Noticing the attack in time, Eric was able to dodge. Seeing the attacker's face, our hero was very surprised. After all, it was the bully from his school, Anthony. He wasn't afraid of fighting him, but Eric was worried that the guy might recognize him and tell everyone about his real identity. After the first failed attack, Anthony continued his attacking combination. Our hero understood that it was only a matter of time before the guy recognized him. Luckily for Eric, Morticia intervened in the fight and quickly stopped Anthony. Seeing the star on the guy's hand, the girl said indignantly, "Why are you doing this, amigo? You already have a star, so why don't you stop? I'm giving you a chance to just leave and keep the star," Morticia added in a calm voice. Realizing that he couldn't stand up to two first-class fighters, the guy simply turned around and left. The girl was pleasantly surprised that among the participants, there were those who actually thought with their heads. Now, Eric only hoped that Anthony didn't recognize him. But from the guy's look, it was clear that the Berserker's face was familiar to him. After some more time, Orca announced the completion of the exam. "Well, my dear scum, that's the end. And I congratulate you. And our beloved viewers are very unhappy that there were many unexpected winners among you. Because of you, they lost their money, and I don't care. By the way, there are only 8 players who received stars, and those who failed the tests this year will be able to try their luck next year. Because of Eric's victory in the exam, his classmates lost money, and Mark was just glad that everything was okay with his friend, although he is worried about Eric getting into Fafa TV. But watching the live broadcast, he realized that our hero could stand up for himself. The Coliseum administration will provide the 8 participants who passed the exam with an official player ID. Before saying goodbye, Orca reminded that in the Coliseum, the strong man is the truth. Remember that the Coliseum is not a place for scum, but for those who find knowledge difficult. So we take everything we want by force. Only through constant battle will you find freedom. My advice to you is to rise higher and higher. Those who demonstrate their best skills in battle will be able to join one of the 4 strongest clans." For Eric, it was a surprise to see the Black Mamba logo among them, when suddenly a Morticia came up to him, and leaning over, she whispered, "It was fun today, amigo. See you in real life." "I can't wait to get to know you better, Eric," the girl added, after which I logged out of the system to avoid unnecessary questions. It's worth mentioning that in the Coliseum you can both increase your rank and lose it. If you lose your rank, you leave the Coliseum. After the exam was over, Steve and Irene finally breathed a sigh of relief, which can't be said about Foxy, who failed the boss's mission. Returning to reality, Eric felt a severe headache, as if he had been under anesthesia, and everything that happened seemed like a dream to him. Even though the exam only lasted a few hours, the guy felt as if he hadn't seen Irina and Steve for several months. Even though the exam now felt like it was happening, he remembered everything that had happened, and he had a lot of questions that he wanted answers to. But more about that a little later. The next day, Eric finally returned to school. For many, it was a real surprise. For a whole month, no one had seen him or heard anything about him, and today he appeared as if nothing had happened. And also, for the first time in 2 years, Mark saw a sincere smile on his friend's face, which he was incredibly happy about. Approaching our hero, Mark began a conversation as usual, as if nothing had happened. During the big break, the guys, as usual, went to the roof, where Eric told everything. After learning the truth, Mark was distraught about Cardi and Kabi and how the teachers were doing nothing about it. And Eric, as a good friend, tried to calm him down, saying that everything was fine now. When suddenly Mark said, "Listen, it's none of my business, but why do you need this Fafa TV? You haven't signed a contract with any clan yet, so if you need to earn money, it's better to find another job." After thinking for a bit, Eric replied, "You know, I used to think the same way as you. Using skills I've only ever used in games in a fight. That's a ridiculous idea, right? Surprisingly, by trusting them, I was able to develop. In the end, it seems the choice wasn't wrong. It was certainly difficult, but I also can't live all the time as if everything inside me is dead, our hero added in a sad voice. Laughing, Mark added, "Relax like that. Still, your flushed face makes me a little uneasy. You look much happier than you did a month ago. So whatever you do that brings you happiness, keep doing it. But please be careful." Right after school, Eric went to the Underdog training gym. He enjoyed training hard and feeling tired after training. But most of all, he loved the feeling of how much stronger he was becoming. Moreover, his main drawback was his physical strength, which could only be corrected through grueling training. During the final stage of the exam, our hero felt that the other star players were superior to him and were not affected by his counterattack tactics. And this means that against more serious enemies, you need to have a few more trump cards. But first, you need to eliminate your main shortcoming. During training, the thought that without the help of Mexicana and Meteor, he would have lost did not leave his head. It was these thoughts that motivated him to become stronger. With each blow, a feeling of hunger awoke in him, a hunger for a fight. And at that moment, he stopped abruptly because of a severe headache. During training with Steve, the guy complained to him about this, and Steve said that this was a side effect from the first connections to the re-apple, and that it would soon pass. But more than a month of daily connections has passed, and the pain still hasn't gone away. Meanwhile, Steve and Irene connected to Reaple. The whole point is that Steve wanted to hold a clan meeting without Eric's participation. Justin and Morticia were also present. The guy called this meeting to introduce Irina to the rest of the clan members, and at the same time tell the guys both of the main goals of Underdog. Irina was the first to introduce herself, telling a little about herself, after which Morticia did the same. After listening to the girl, Irina asked, "You do have skills, why did you come to us?" The Mexican woman, a little embarrassed, replied, "If you're going to get into fights, wouldn't it be interesting to join the weak side rather than the strong one? Because then if you win, you get a completely different pleasure," the girl added with a creepy smile. At this point, Justin interrupted her and said with displeasure, "Disgusting. What are you saying? You apparently have great moral principles," the girl objected indignantly. Completely ignoring Morticia's words, Justin introduced himself, and his purpose in joining the Underdog was to destroy someone, namely the master of the Wolf clan from the Conso region, named Danzo. Not missing the opportunity to tease her Mexican partner, the Viper said, "What a vulnerable soul. What did he do to you, scatter your notebooks all over the classroom?" But Justin didn't appreciate such a joke, throwing a creepy look at Morticia, after which he grabbed her by the jacket and pulled him towards himself, getting ready to strike. But at the last moment, the guy was able to control his feelings and stopped. Whatever happened between Danzo and Justin, one thing was clear. It was something serious. Having calmed down a bit, the guy let the Morticia go, and the girl felt a little ashamed of her behavior. When suddenly Irina asked, "Steve, why did we meet without Eric?" "Take your time, I was just about to tell you about this," the guy answered. Meteor intervened and whispered discontentedly, "Berserker. Or Eric, it doesn't matter. I don't understand why they took him. He's a weakling. He just looks capable because he has such a fast reaction time, that's all. He has no skills or experience," Justin added indignantly. "You're right, he lacks experience, but you're wrong. If you think that speed is his only useful skill," said Irina, "he has a good feel for the map and can take advantage of its advantages." "That's nonsense," Justin exclaimed indignantly. "I don't agree with you. If he learned what he can do in just a month, he's a capable kid," the Morticia added. "However, I am concerned about our amigo's lack of confidence." "What are you talking about? What uncertainty?" Irina asked, surprised. But in response, the girl only smiled sweetly, leaving the question unanswered. Understanding that they won't find out anything now, Steve and Irina decided to come a little closer to the guys. Reducing the distance is one of the techniques for improving relationships. After listening to the opinions of all the clan members, Steve said, "The goal of our clan, this is to defeat the 4 clans that have taken over the Colosseum. And after we gain control of this game, in the end, this damn Colosseum will be disbanded and Fafa TV will cease to exist. That's our goal." After introducing the new recruits to the true goals of Underdog, Irene left the session. To Martiche, Steve's plan seemed crazy and incredibly dangerous. Justin saw a problem with all this. To carry out this plan, the clan needed at least 4 D-rank members. Only then could they officially join the Alliance. At this stage, the clan already has 2 members with the required rank. Besides, the chances that the guys will be allowed to raise their rank so quickly are incredibly small. But Steve promised that he would take care of everything. In addition, he wanted to introduce the guys to some of the clan's rules. There were only 2 points that needed to be followed. First, high-ranking Coliseum participants should not fight each other, since violation of this rule will result in immediate expulsion. Players registered as high-ranking players only fight against official clans. Fighting for personal reasons is considered a violation of the rules. And the second rule: you cannot participate in a ranked battle based solely on your own decisions. Participation in such battles is only permitted with the clan master's permission, while Steve was introducing Justin and Morticia to the rules. Irina did the same thing, especially for Eric. Most of all, our hero was shocked by the true goals of Underdog. The guy simply could not imagine that someone would dare to do such a thing. Seeing the horror in the guy's eyes, Irina calmed him down by saying that they would not give him difficult battles. "I can't tell you the details yet, but I hope you'll trust us. I'm sorry if it seemed like we deceived you," Irina added sadly. Eric laughed and replied, "Maybe it's for the best." "Stop what?" the girl asked distantly. "Don't pay any attention. I haven't been myself lately," our hero shouted with horror on his face. "Listen, Irina, is the Black Mamba targeting me because of our goals?" Eric added worriedly. "I doubt it. They know practically nothing about you. They only guess what school you're from. I think it will be some time before they discover the connection between you and the Berserker," Irin replied. "Plus, Foxy saw Eric fail the Satami test, and she doesn't know that he actually got his code. And that will give Eric some more time." Meanwhile, at the Black Mamba headquarters, Foxy and her goons punished the bullies for their failed mission. "The guys from the clan really liked me that Berserker passed the distribution exam. But on the other hand, what we didn't expect was that all these guys were just hooligans, not professional fighters. Now the Black Mamba clan is in big trouble. The placement exam was their last chance to eliminate the Berserker, and they missed it." According to reports, Foxy suspected that Berserker was actually Eric, but the fact that he failed Satami's test didn't give her any confidence. And since it was impossible to take part in the exam without the code, suspicions against our hero were quickly removed. Her husband's Berserker was not her only problem, and she also saw danger in Meteora and the Mexican woman. Initially, she wanted to invite them to the clan, but found out that they were already members of another clan. In general, due to the failure of Jashimi and the others, she had a whole mountain of problems. And despite this, Fuchsia decided to give them a second chance. Those who can obtain useful information about the Berserker will receive a good cash reward. And by the way, those who passed the exam and received the F rank will not become members of the Black Mamba, since they failed the task. Foxy was betting that these guys would be able to get the information she needed. Of course, many did not like the fact that they were now the Black Mamba's tame dogs. But no one wanted to contradict the head of one of the 4 strongest clans. Kabi began to think about how to slip out from under Foxy's nose unnoticed. But Anthony had a different plan. After thinking for a while, the guy said, "Kabi, I think I know who Berserker is." "What? Why didn't you say anything then? Why didn't you tell that crazy woman everything?" Kabi asked in surprise. "You know, I'm curious too. Why did you hide it?" Anthony whispered in a creepy voice, after which he hit his friend with all his strength right on the neck. After pushing the guy against the wall and hitting him a few more times, Anthony shouted, "Why? Tell me!" "Because I didn't believe what I saw either." "This face, it's him," Kabi whispered, coughing. "But you know, about a month ago, someone beat up Cardi. And what a coincidence, this brat suddenly started skipping school too. And then the Berserker showed up," Anthony said, holding his friend by the throat. Unlike Foxy, the guy didn't have the slightest doubt. 2 weeks have passed since the placement exam and the Underdog clan meeting. And today, the first competition of new participants of the Coliseum is being held. All attention is focused on 2 people, the Mexican woman and the Meteor, who saved the Berserker. And the host of this competition will be a girl named Soyun, a subordinate of the orc. The first challenge map was Jelly World. You can use Jelly's bouncy powers to move around. As soon as the competition began, Morticia immediately missed several blows, which is quite expected because the participants here are much stronger than at the exam. To be fair, Justin also had it tough. He was attacked by one of the strongest F-rank fighters. Today's battle is ranked and takes place in a one-on-one format. The hosts, as well as the audience, watched the underdog clan with great delight because this was their first test in the Colosseum, and their opponents were very experienced fighters. But even so, viewers for the most part are betting on promising newcomers. You might be wondering, why isn't Eric participating? The thing is, Steve sent Justin and Morticia to this test for one purpose: identify their weaknesses in order to develop a training plan. But in the case of our hero, there is no such need. His weak points are already known. When suddenly Eric came up to Irina and said with a sad look, "Listen, I think I'll be going now." "Are you quick? Did something happen?" the girl asked. "No, it's just, even if I'm not here, it seems like there won't be any problems," our hero added. "Why did you decide that?" Irina asked excitedly. But in response, the guy simply turned around and left. And even a fool could understand that Eric was offended. At that moment, Irina was talking to Steve on the phone, and she yelled at her brother for removing our hero's name from the list for this test. Basically, the girl was furious that Steve was making Eric feel useless compared to everyone else. After listening to all his sister's complaints, the guy silently hung up. The thing is that he had a very important business meeting right now. Steve was still trying to solve Eric's riddle. So he decided to talk to the only person who could tell him anything: our hero's former coach. Walking home from training, Eric tormented himself with thoughts about how useless and weak he was. In addition, the headaches became more severe and more frequent. He also felt that he had let down Steve, who had given him a chance to prove himself. At some point, my head started to hurt so much that it became impossible to think, and everything started to swim before my eyes. Previously, Eric thought that it was due to constant training and overwork. And even at some point, the guy thought about leaving the Colosseum and the clan and Ripple in general. But the distance traveled was so great that there was no point in turning back. And besides, he didn't want the people who cared about him to be disappointed in him. But being a burden to the clan was even worse. When suddenly Eric's phone rang, which surprised the guy greatly since no one ever calls him. At first, our hero thought that Steve was calling him, since Irina had most likely already called him. But no, it was some unknown number calling him. The guy usually doesn't answer calls from strangers, but this time he decided to answer. "Hello," Eric said timidly. "I didn't expect you to answer. It's been 2 weeks?" The voice from the phone. "Excuse me, what? Who are you?" our hero asked in surprise. "Stop playing dumb and pretending you don't know me." "Stranger, if this is some kind of prank, then goodbye," Eric added angrily. "It looks like you seriously bleached your ears at the Colosseum. Didn't you recognize me?" "It's me, your friend Anthony. I'm warning you, if you hang up, you hang up." "Eric, I have something to discuss. Or should I address you as Mr. Berserker? You know the school's 9th building, right? I'll be waiting for you there. And believe me, it's better for you to come. But the choice is always yours. Just know if you don't show up, the Black Mamba will come for you," Anthony said, laughing. The situation is really bad, and our hero doesn't have much of a choice. And at that moment, the hooligan felt genuine pleasure. He understood perfectly well that he held all the cards in his hands, and Eric had nowhere to go. Until the very end, Kabi doubted that our hero was a berserker. But after the conversation, he was convinced of it, and believed that they should immediately report this to the Black Mamba, because then they would have a chance to become members of the clan. But Anthony was categorically against this. He understood that Foxy was simply using them. The fairy tale about joining the clan was just a scam. However, he was confident that if they eliminated the berserker once and for all, the Black Mamba would accept them unconditionally. However, Kabi had serious doubts about this plan, since fighting with other participants could lead to their expulsion from the Colosseum. But Anthony has already figured out how to do it. He didn't want to risk his place in the Colosseum, so he developed a very cunning plan. The guy was going to make Eric attack them himself. About an hour later, our hero arrived at the appointed place. Eric understood perfectly well that this meeting would not end well, but he simply had no other choice. If he hadn't come to meet her, the Black Mamba would have learned his real name, and that would have been the end of it. Knowing people like Anthony, our hero assumed that the bully would demand money for his silence. Upon entering the office, the first thing Erica met was Kabi. It was clear from the guy's face that the conversation would not be pleasant. When suddenly a voice rang out, "Don't be so afraid. If I wanted to run you over, I would have done it right after school, and you would be lying in the hospital right now," Anthony added, who was currently betting on a trial on Fafa TV. The whole time, Eric was looking at Anthony with an expression on his face as if he was ready to tear him apart. Putting his phone in his pocket, the guy said, "I called you to have a nice talk, and you're looking at me like that. Okay, I'm more concerned about why Black Mamba declared a hunt for you. There are many players far more dangerous than you. And also, why are you so persistent in hiding from everyone? Although, does it matter if I know who you are?" Anthony said with a smile. After listening to the guy, Eric rudely asked, "What do you want?" Hugging our hero, the hooligan whispered, "It's very simple. We weren't allowed to fight properly, so I want you to accept my challenge to a ranked battle. And at the same time, you will put everything in. Yes, you got it right. The loser will lose everything, and the winner will become a legend. And to make you relax a little, I'll give you insight for this fight. You'll lose. But all of that can be avoided if you leave the Coliseum, and I'll pay you another 100,000 won as compensation," Anthony added, laughing. But then Kabi intervened in their conversation. 100,000? And you're being generous today. You can't say it, but he's a poor guy, so I decided to help him out of old friendship, Anthony replied. Eric understood perfectly well that this was all just a provocation, and he just needed to ignore his words. Besides, the guy understood perfectly well that if he got into a fight right now, he would expose the entire clan. Noticing that our hero was starting to get nervous and clench his fists, Anthony decided to put the squeeze on him. "By the way, what do you think will happen if the Black Mamba finds out who you are?" the hooligan asked unexpectedly. "Because of the Coliseum rules, you're unlikely to be touched. But I think Mark will definitely end up in the hospital, if not in the freezer. There was that incident in the Conso area some time ago. It was even shown on the news. I don't think you have anything to worry about. They certainly won't touch you. I just feel sorry for your friend," Anthony added. Unable to bear it any longer, Eric grabbed the guy by the jacket and prepared to hit him, but at the last moment he was able to hold back his fist. After which he said, "What does he have to do with it? He doesn't even know who he is. If a single hair falls from his head, I'll send you to the grave," Eric added with a crazed, dark-side look. Anthony saw our hero in such a state for the first time. But despite the mad look, he was not afraid of it, because he knew that it would not touch him. And we are transported to Irina and Steve's apartment. Today's conversation with our hero did not give the girl any peace. She thought about Eric's words for a long time and tried to understand her brother. When suddenly Irina said, "Listen, why did you suddenly decide to find out about his past?" "I was at a dead end, and I needed information to further cultivate the Berserker," Steve replied. "I see, as usual, all you see in him is a warrior. You should think about his mental state. Besides, he's been having a really bad headache lately," Irina said thoughtfully. "Steve, please be more vigilant towards the clan members. They're not just warriors, they're people too," the girl added. But in response, the guy simply remained silent, staring at a point. And the reason for this answer is only that Steve and Irene know Eric from different sides. The girl saw in our hero an ordinary guy who fights with all his might. And Steve saw his dark side, which craves to beat and maim people. And after talking with Eric's former coach, Steve was only convinced of this. To the question, "What can you say about Eric?" the coach replied, "There are two of them. Which one exactly are you interested in?" And we are transported to the morning of the next day. Some unknown guy had been calling since early morning. After answering the phone, this guy received an offer to host today's broadcast of Fafa TV. At first, he wanted to refuse this offer, but when I found out that there would be VIP guests, I immediately changed my mind. The whole process of live broadcasting was very tiring for him, but when he found out who would be among the participants, he simply could not help but agree. Being alone with himself, this guy said, "So the one he was looking for was this guy? Looking at the way he acts, it seems like he's similar to the old Taiwan. Well, anyway, he's the one raising him, so there's no need to worry. In fact, I'm even interested in what he will become." "Steve, I'm counting on you," the stranger whispered sadly, adjusting the old photograph. As you may have already guessed, This guy is on the same team as Steve and Tavon, and now everyone knows him as one of the strongest clan leaders and the permanent host of Fafa TV, Orc. Due to past mistakes, the Orca became the lapdog of the Collision's owners, which is why he often has to be the leader. However, today is a completely different story. Today is the Berserker's first official fight after the distribution exam, and he, as Steve's former partner, simply could not miss such an event. Having greeted all the spectators and sponsors, Orca began introducing them to the participants. And in the first fight of today, I will meet Anthony with the nickname The Beehive. And the most talked about newcomer of this season is Berserker. Moreover, after the exam, many sponsors turned their attention to him. And today is an excellent chance to prove himself. Although today's battle does not claim to be the main event of the year, some representatives of the Big Four still came here. And Anthony saw this as an excellent chance to move up the Coliseum ladder. Be that as it may, the guy is taking a big risk because if he fails, the Black Mamba will definitely try to deal with him. However, Anthony is not as stupid as he might seem at first glance, and he has prepared something interesting. He studied the Berserker and developed a plan for victory. Before the battle begins, the guys need to choose a map by general vote. Orca offered several of the most popular maps for PvP battles, but the guys refused them and chose another card. They chose one of those maps that players avoid, a place where wind and smoke rage. And this card is Eye of the Typhoon. For your information, the smoke only covers the eyes of the participants, so the spectators will see everything clearly. Although this is the easiest map to master, it has a narrow field of view. That's why Anthony chose it. After all, our hero's main advantage was his lightning-fast reaction, and the smoke would make visibility difficult. In other words, on this map, the one with the greater power has the advantage. Once the Eye of the Typhoon was fully loaded, Eric said, "Hey, Anthony, is this what you wanted? I did everything as you wanted. I hope you keep your word too." Upon hearing these words, bewilderment appeared on the guy's face because he didn't understand what Eric was talking about. Having discussed a number of basic rules, the Orc gave the signal to begin the battle. Due to the poor visibility, none of the guys were in a hurry to go on the attack first. Both were of the opinion that counterattacking was the best way to win. And not a few moments later, Eric heard a voice right behind him. "What are you mumbling about promises?" Anthony finally decided to go first. Our hero miraculously managed to dodge his leg. If the hooligan hadn't spoken up, the fight would have ended there. An even bigger problem was that smoke immediately enveloped the enemy after an unsuccessful attack, thereby hiding him. For Anthony, these were perfect conditions for an attack. By changing the trajectory of his blow, the bully scored. But his fist hit the Berserker's block straight, throwing Eric back. Just a second ago, the enemy was right in front of him, and now there was only thick smoke. And again, a voice from behind. "I was disgusted that someone like you behaved as if he disregarded me. Well, since you allowed yourself to do this, I'll show you what we're made of." And again, Anthony gave away his location by speaking. Only this time, after an unsuccessful attack, he did not retreat, but on the contrary began to increase the pressure. Seeing the enemy made it much easier for Eric to fight and dodge all of his attacks. But the bully had driven him into a corner, which is why our hero was forced to constantly defend himself. And of course, at that moment, Anthony felt absolute superiority. But most of all, the guy wanted to see Arena's disappointed face. This was his revenge. In the end, it all came to the point that Berserker could no longer defend himself and missed a powerful right hook. After this, most sponsors lost interest in Berserker. Among the invited VIP guests were not only sponsors, but also representatives of the Big Four. And Foxy was here too. She couldn't miss the Berserker fight. After taking a hit, our hero began to bleed, and the odds began to shift sharply in Anthony's favor. The Orc and the spectators couldn't believe their eyes. The most promising newcomer was kneeling in front of a rather mediocre fighter and coughing up blood. "I understand that with the next blow, he will finish everything." The bully, laughing, said, "Is it hard? After all, I studied how you fight. I don't know what you were thinking when you came to the Coliseum, but today I'm expelling you." And a second after these words, Anthony tried to finish Eric off with his foot, but our hero managed to jump back in time. It's just a pity that this won't change anything. he still doesn't know where his enemy is. He only occasionally sees a silhouette passing by. And the hooligan uses the already familiar tactics. You confuse the enemy with runs and then come at him from behind. But that was his mistake. He underestimated Eric's ability to learn from his own mistakes. Feeling another blow flying towards his head, our hero quickly stepped back, creating an additional smokescreen to make it harder for Anthony to detect him. And by the way, remember the clan rule that you can't fight in ranked battles without Steve's consent. So Eric broke that rule. And watching the fight, Steve realized he had good reasons for it. Having thought it over thoroughly, the guy became angry with himself for not being able to protect our hero from this. However, he believed that any situation could be turned into something beneficial. The conditions in which Eric found himself would teach him to use more than just his vision and develop his other skills. Overall, it would have been a good workout if there wasn't such a big stake at stake. Meanwhile, our hero continued to stand and defend himself. It has become much easier to anticipate enemy attacks and block them. But you can't win a fight with just blocks and dodges. Besides, the tactic of eternal running away is not particularly effective. Anthony, like Eric, also learns very quickly during combat. The bully constantly attacked. Don't let the guy hide. Luckily, the blows passed close by and did not touch our hero. But after the missed blow, he didn't have much strength left, and he became noticeably slower, which can't be said about Anthony. When suddenly the orc said, "Although the berserker's identity is classified, one thing is clear. He is from the Kanbuk region, and it looks like these two have some problems that they are solving in the arena." I don't want to seem pessimistic, but it looks like Anthony from Paramsan School is about to finish everything. Let's be honest. Not only the presenters thought so, but also all the spectators, sponsors, and even the fighters. The moment Eric was forced to hand over the right to choose the card to Anthony, our hero knew that this is how it would all end. Moreover, for such an experienced opponent, the combat tactics are quite predictable. Eric never attacked first, but only took a position and fought back. And all his outstanding strength lies only in the speed of his reaction. And the thick smoke of the eye of the typhoon deprived him of this advantage. By changing his tactics slightly, Anthony was able to catch our hero off guard and deliver an incredibly powerful attack that is almost impossible to withstand. The bully was sure that this was the end of the battle and the end of the Berserker era. The sponsors were of the same opinion, and only Foxy doubted that this was the end. As if from behind her, a rough male voice sounded, "It seems everything is coming to an end." "It's a pity that this berserker turned out to be so ordinary," the stranger added with a sly smile. "I wish I could say I'm glad to see you, but I'm not. What do you want?" Foxy said irritably. "Don't worry, I'm not here to see you. I'm here to take care of something important," the guy replied, laughing. "Did I misheard, or did you say important? It's impossible for anything to be important to you," the girl added. "Meet the leader of the Wolf Clan, Danzo from the Kanso region. The very same guy Justin wants revenge on." Meanwhile, to everyone's surprise, the battle continued. Despite his absolute superiority, Anthony was gradually losing confidence, and all because no matter how many punches Eric takes, he is still able to fight. Realizing that the fight could not be dragged out any longer, hooligans decided to try something else. Having spotted our hero, the guy went on the attack. It was a very banal and already predictable attack. So Eric, as always, simply stepped back. But then Anthony grabbed the cloak, immobilizing him. This is a very dirty trick, which the rules of the Colosseum do not prohibit, but do not encourage either. As a result, Eric took another powerful blow straight to his chest. Because of this, his breathing became very disrupted, and our hero became just a punching bag. Watching the live broadcast, Steve was well aware that Eric was one step away from being thrown out of the Colosseum. Danzo and Foxy thought the same, and it even looked like the girl was upset about it. Even the eternally cheerful Orca became sad, when suddenly something happened that excited everyone. Bleeding, Eric began to laugh non-stop, which greatly surprised his opponent and all the spectators. Not understanding what was happening, Anthony shouted, "What are you doing? Stop laughing!" "Why should I stop? It's so funny!" Berserker whispered with a slight smile. The hooligan stared intently into our hero's eyes, trying to understand what had happened to him. Letting go of Eric, Anthony whispered, "You know, you're right. It really is funny. It's funny how weak and pathetic you are," the guy added, shouting and swinging his fist. With this blow, the hooligan hoped to end the protracted fight. But it's not that simple. Eric attacked him in the most unexpected way. A powerful kick right to the jaw caught Anthony off guard. As he fell, the boy felt himself losing consciousness, and at that moment, Berserker was just laughing and enjoying what was happening. However, Anthony turned out to be much stronger than expected. He was able to withstand that blow, although he knew perfectly well that he almost lost. Seeing the Berserker's crazed eyes, the bully understood perfectly well that it would now be much more difficult to win, because he wouldn't fall for the previous tricks. And at that moment, the guy remembered Kabi's words about the crazy look after which Eric becomes completely different. Although at first glance, he has not changed at all. When suddenly he laughed again in that same creepy voice. His laughter filled the entire arena, and the spectators and sponsors were perplexed. "Snot, what are you laughing at? You only hit me once!" Anthony shouted angrily, after which he emerged from the smoke to look his opponent straight in the eye. "Finally, you stopped hiding like a rat. You still won't understand why I'm laughing, so I won't even say anything," Eric replied. "You know, I should say thank you because thanks to you, I'm free again," our hero added. These words made the bully feel uneasy. He felt as if Berserker was playing some kind of game with him, but doesn't want to show his fear. The guy laughed and said, "I don't know what kind of nonsense you're talking about, but apparently you have some kind of problems with your head. Even though you have become stronger, but don't think you can win. I'll raise you to the ground," Anthony added confidently. After these words, Eric, laughing, disappeared into the smoke. Finding himself out of the enemy's sight, he said, "You could have beaten me a month ago during the placement exam." "But since then, everything has changed," Eric added in a whisper. "Don't be arrogant." "I can do it now," Anthony objected. "Of course, but do you have enough strength and courage for this?" our hero shouted through a terrible laugh. But then, without further ado, Anthony again came up behind Eric and began his attack. The guy didn't believe in all this nonsense about the crazy look and sudden force, so he thought that the attack, as always, would achieve its goal. But that was his biggest mistake. Just as he was within striking distance, Berserker connected with a powerful right hook to his jaw. Anthony still couldn't believe that this was actually happening, but the metallic taste of blood in his mouth made him believe it. Before the fight began, he studied our hero's fighting style thoroughly and knew that he was only striking back. But now everything has changed. He doesn't wait for the enemy to attack, but attacks first. And he does it quite successfully. What is happening now can be considered the beginning of the end. Berserker has burst forth in all his glory and is destroying his opponent with incredible thirst. When suddenly, after one successful combination, Eric stopped, after which he said in a gloomy voice, "Hey, what's wrong with you? Don't you want to have some fun? I expected more from you." Realizing that he wouldn't be able to withstand an equal fight, the hooligan decided to hide in the smoke. But let's be honest, this attempt looked pathetic. In a matter of seconds, our hero caught up with him and launched a lightning-fast attack. For everyone watching this fight, this development of events came as a surprise, and the sponsors were simply delighted. Such a strong contrast aroused their even greater interest in the Berserker. Even the Orca was delighted. He thought our hero had been putting on an act all along, just to make more noise. And only Steve wasn't surprised. He was trying to figure it out. From the moment they first met, he was incredibly interested in our hero's second nature, who acted quickly and confidently. The guy peered into every movement, trying to see something unusual, something that could give him answers. Eric's movements not only became faster and stronger, but they completely changed their character from defensive to offensive. This created a lot of problems for the enemy, as he was already accustomed to Eric's defensive scheme. Even Danzo, with his incredible combat experience, was shocked because he could not see all of the Berserker's movements. Now he finally understood why the Black Mamba was so actively trying to eliminate him. Meanwhile, Anthony lost all confidence and hope for victory. Just a few moments ago, he thought the battle was over, but now he feels the forces leaving his body. From this terrible feeling of helplessness, the boy screamed desperately. "But you can't win a fight with shouts!" Eric delivered a stunning kick, knocking his opponent to the ground. And in order to deprive him of his dignity and the slightest chance of victory, he hit his head with his boot. When suddenly Berserker said, "Thank you for beating me. Thanks to this, I was able to wake up. But considering you know everything about me, I want to kill you, our hero added. Move your leg quickly, otherwise the Black Mamba will find out everything about you. Imagine how that bloodthirsty fool will be glad to know your real name. But you can definitely stand up for yourself. But as for your friend, I'm not so sure. Just imagine how they will mutilate him. I doubt even the doctors will be able to put him back together. Anthony answered, laughing. You're funny, it's a pity you're stupid, our hero whispered in a creepy voice, after which he removed his foot from the bully's head. The bully considered this a victory, but the thing is, Eric only took his foot away to hit him with even more force. You're finished! Even if you win, everyone will know! Anthony shouted angrily. Not wanting to listen to the senseless screams, BERSERKER covered his mouth with his foot. Eric understood perfectly well that the Black Mamba and the other clans from the Big Four would still extract all the information from Anthony. However, our hero had a plan to avoid this. Kill the bully and shut his mouth forever. Laughing, Eric added, have a good trip to hell. After which he kicked him in the head with all his might, smashing it on the concrete floor. This picture made even the most ruthless viewers shudder. At this point, the duel was over. BERSERKER won. Orc dubbed this fight exceptional. In the entire history of the Colosseum, only a few fights have received such status, which meant that this fight was incredibly exciting and unexpected. Like all spectators, sponsors became even more interested in BERSERKER. Many of them have made a fortune on bets today thanks to him. Today's fight reminded the soul of our hero of nostalgia. After all, the last time he had to pretend to be weak was back in the days of one frame. After returning to the real world, Eric had something important to do. He didn't expect to be forgiven and allowed to stay, but he had to apologize to Steve. Entering the clan's base, his heart beat so hard it hadn't beaten here for a long time. He felt ashamed and even a little scared. Seeing Steve, Eric said with pitiful eyes, Captain, forgive me. But before you make a decision, I want you to listen to me. Looking at our hero with the most menacing look imaginable, Steve pointed to a chair and said, be quiet and sit opposite me. Having seated the guy on a chair, Steve was silent for a long time, occasionally looking at something on his phone. Realizing that he was wrong in this situation, Eric apologized again and promised that it was a one-time mistake and that it would not happen again. After listening to our hero, the Steppe smiled sarcastically, after which he asked, maybe that's enough? Or do you like pretending to do this? I've been trying to figure out your secret for a long time, Eric, Steve shouted. So you got it all? You're the first one to succeed, our hero whispered, a terrifying expression on his face. At first I thought it was some kind of mental disorder, but I got curious, so I invited you to the team. And today I finally realized that this is the real you, Steve replied. I never doubted you, but it's unlikely you could figure it all out so quickly on your own, right? Eric asked. Yes, I was told that your character was originally like that, but due to certain problems you carefully hid it, Steve replied, peering at our hero. Upon learning that he had been exposed, our hero only sighed heavily. I don't think there's any point in lying, it's all true. If only you knew what a pleasure it is to remove this idiot's mask. I had to pretend to be a different person in order to live peacefully among the players, and I hid my true self very carefully. But what I could not hide was my greed for victory. Only my coach, whom I respected and treated calmly, knew about this. Our hero thoughtfully told about his life. But then Steve interrupted him and said, I know all this. I'm interested in your condition. What's your condition? Apparently this old man told you everything, Eric answered with a smile. You misunderstood me. I'm worried about whether you'll stay with yourself, Steve asked a little nervously. This question greatly surprised the guy. So for some time he didn't know what to answer and just remained silent. Realizing that Steve wouldn't let him go so easily, Eric added, I really used to be the most ordinary, but after the failure of my career, I changed for the worse. You can't understand what it's like to lose everything you've ever strived for. That's when I became like this. I won't hide it. I liked living as a loser. But after my first fight, I could hide my thirst for victory. At that moment, a smile appeared on Steve's face, after which he asked, in that case, will you be like this all the time from now on? That's right, my captain. I won't hide anymore, Eric replied with a slight smile. When suddenly Irina ran into the room. The girl was covered in sweat and breathing heavily. It was clear that she was worried about something. Seeing our hero, the girl screamed, "Eric, you're a fool!" Irina believed that our hero got into a fight because of resentment towards Steve. But her brother quickly cooled her ardor, saying that they had already discussed everything and there was no point in shouting. Having calmed down a little, Irina added, "This Anthony, he was always like this. Calm down, I'm not telling you this as a brother, but as the head of the clan. This idiot is finished. Now it's important to decide what to do next," Steve shouted indignantly. By the way, from now on, our hero will take part in all battles where underdog will participate. Irina believed that Steve made this decision so as not to offend our hero. But the truth is much more complex, and the guys agreed that their conversation would remain a secret, at least for a while. Right now, Steve was most concerned about the Big Four's reaction to this situation. And believe me, his experiences are not without foundation. Immediately after the fight between Eric and Anthony, several heads of the Big Four called a meeting, which was attended by Danzo, the head of the Wolf Clan, and Foxy, the head of the Black Mamba Clan. The appearance of the Berserker was a great threat to their clans, but Danzo believed that it was too late to intervene, and Foxy agreed with him. But Berserker wasn't the only one who worried her. The girl saw a threat in all three members of the Underdog clan. We're talking about Martiche, Justin, and Irene. All of them are superior to any enemy at their rank. But what alarmed her most was that the commander of their clan was Steve, whom she knew well. Having reviewed the fighters' personal files, Danzo also considered them to be quite capable. There remains only one question. What should they do now? The head of the strongest clan must decide this. Meet the leader of the Scorpion clan, the strongest fighter in the Colosseum, and Steve's former partner, Tevan Scar. Without thinking twice, the guy decided not to interfere in the affairs of Underdog for a while and let them move up, in order to destroy them all at once at the right moment. Steve and Tevan have long-standing differences that make them want to kill each other. They both believed that the time had come to put an end to their confrontation by the death of one of them. But before, they were best friends who were ready to cover each other's backs. But from love to hate, there is only one step, and we are transported a couple of months ahead, to the last day of spring. And this means that summer holidays begin tomorrow. Many of the guys decided to spend the entire summer in Ripple, leveling up their characters. Well, let's be honest, we are not interested in this, and it is not important. However, today is not just the last day of school. Today is the day when all the Underdog participants will meet in real life. Morticia met Eric near his school, and the first thing she said to him, "You are much higher in life than in the game, Eric, and I don't update my character on purpose. Of course, I'll have to pay a fine for this, but it makes it harder to track me down," our hero replied with a smile. Having gotten to know each other a little better, the guy asked the mortician why she dressed like that. The thing is that recently they have been on everyone's lips, and these are her disguises. By the way, all the guys reached the D rank. Now they can safely be considered celebrities. Therefore, in their case, camouflage and conspiracy are incredibly important. Making sure no one could hear them, Morticia said, "Eric, I'm really glad to see you like this." A little embarrassed, the boy replied, "So you understood everything?" "Are you kidding me? I'm not stupid. I recognized you from the very first meeting, so there was no need to hide it," the girl answered, laughing. This was quite expected, because after that conversation with Steve, Eric stopped pretending. For the past 2 months, Morticia and Justin have been training together, using Steve's plan. And only our hero studied individually. And it must be said that these training sessions were of great benefit to everyone. In competitions, Eric, as usual, used his knowledge of maps and dexterity, hiding his true potential. And that was more than enough to be the first to reach rank D. And Irina was simply training all this time since there were no opponents for her. However, today is not just the last day of spring. Today is the first day of competition to confirm the D rank. One of the orc's subordinates will make her debut as the host. The first fight is about to begin, and the first participant is Inomu from the Black Mamba clan. This guy has gained a reputation as a very cruel and strong guy who plays unfairly. Foxy considered Inomu to be one of the strongest fighters in her clan. But how did it happen that such a strong guy was only a D rank? More on that later. Much more interesting is who his opponent is. Last season's star who was forced to take an enforced break. As you may have guessed, this is Irin from the Underdog clan. Steve knew Enoma very well, so he was worried about his sister. Of course, Irina is an incredibly capable fighter who surpasses her rank, but he's still worried about her. Moreover, during a recent training session, the girl injured her left shoulder. Seeing his brother, Irin said, "Just trust me and wait. I understand that he won't help her in any way." The guy returned to the real world. Meanwhile, all the clan members were gathered. "Listen, Steve, why did you gather us together?" Justin asked indignantly. "The thing is that Irina came out to fight after a long time, and her opponent, let's say if he was from some second-class clan, I wouldn't be worried, but he's because of the Black Mamba. But the problem is, he's a former A-rank fighter," Steve whispered thoughtfully. The guys found this very strange because fighters from the clan in the Big Four never lowered their ranks. Remembering his past experience, Eric had an epiphany. That sly fox, he's using abuse. Simply put, he's abusing the system's rules to intentionally lower his rank. "Our hero said unexpectedly," he said. Although it seemed unlikely, there was sense in his words. In short, Black Mamba sent its strongest fighter specifically to eliminate Iron. And if the girl loses, it will mean that their plan will have to be postponed for several months. When suddenly Justin said, "Don't get me wrong, but Irina has little chance. And that's a problem. I understand your frustration, but she's much stronger than she seems. Our plan will work," Steve responded rudely. "By the way, do you think you need to leave?" Steve added, putting his hand on the guy's shoulder, after which he immediately took his things and left. It was clear from his face that he was worried about something, so the guys didn't ask stupid questions. However, Morticia accidentally found out that Justin goes to the hospital every Wednesday to visit someone. "Captain, it's none of our business, but why does he go there?" the girl asked worriedly. "I think since we're on the same team, I can tell you he's going to visit his friend," Steve replied. "A friend? That's a bit unexpected," the mortician added, puzzled. "Yes, to a friend. That's why he wants revenge on Danzo so badly," the boy added. "It was because of Danzo that Meteor's friend ended up in intensive care. And all this time, Steve taught Justin that the only way to catch a wolf is with bait." Meanwhile, Justin had already arrived at the hospital. All the way, he prayed that Irina would cope, because only then would he have a chance to take revenge. However, he understood that Irina's victory alone would not be enough. After all, Danzo is participating in the battle for the title of A rank. If he succeeds, then Justin will be even further from his goal. In general, the guy decided that he should completely trust Steve, because only then would he have a chance. Justin froze in surprise when he opened his best friend's room. There was a stranger sitting next to his friend's bed. "Hey, who are you and what are you doing here?" Justin shouted indignantly, and in response, the stranger only laughed. On his face was a black mask. At that moment, the Meteor realized that he had made a mistake. The appearance of the masked stranger only meant that his identity had been revealed, meaning that he was now in danger, and along with him, his friend. "How suddenly he didn't get acquainted," he said. "There are probably so many questions in your head right now. If you hide your face and personal information, then you are an enemy," Justin replied. "You can call me whatever you want, Santa Claus, or the Boogeyman. How do you sleep at night after what you did to him?" the stranger added. After these words, Justin seemed to go crazy and attacked the stranger. He wanted to make this guy stop breathing forever. What a surprise, this stranger just grabbed his hand as if there had been no blow. Justin was shocked, no, horrified, that someone was able to intercept his blow. After all, the speed of attack is his main advantage, and this man in the mask seems to be playing with him. "You know quite well, although you are disappointed. And by the way, I am not an enemy, but not a friend either. If it makes you feel better, you can consider me an ally, although I'm against labels," the stranger whispered, stopping Justin's fist. "Shut up already!" the Meteor screamed angrily. "I understand. You want to avenge your friend. But Danzo will grind you into dust if you don't become stronger," the masked boy whispered. It was a harsh truth from which there was no escape. Let's go back to the past, before Justin became a Coliseum fighter. His best friend Scott had been working as a waiter for over 2 years without days off. Somehow the cattle found out that there was a new game where you can make a lot of money. And of course, he wanted to take part in this game. Justin had serious doubts about this idea and tried his best to dissuade Scott. However, the guy's life situation forced him to take this step, because he needed money. Everyone predicted a great future for Scott as a professional fighter, but he simply lacked the funds to reach the professional level. Scott was into fighting before it was popular and dreamed of becoming a great athlete. But life had other plans. In short, no matter how hard Justin tried, he couldn't dissuade his best friend from participating in the Coliseum. And a few days later, Scott was admitted to intensive care in very serious condition. There were rumors that he was caught in a gang fight. Whatever the truth, it was enough to make Justin angry. And from that moment, his revenge began. Justin tracked down everyone who was involved in that fight and beat them up the same way they beat up his friend. And one of the hooligans turned out to be quite talkative. He said that they beat up Scott on the orders of some influential guy. Justin tried to find out the customer's name in a good way, but the bully refused to talk. And then he used torture and eventually found out the name of the customer. It turned out to be Danzo, and since then, the head of the Wolf clan has become the guy's target. Overall, it looked like the guy in the mask wanted to help Justin achieve his goals. But the fact that he was hiding his identity did not give Meteor any peace. Believing the stranger's words, the guy asked, "And how do you want to help me?" "It's very simple. You just need to beat up Danzo." Okay, just kidding. First, you need to get to know your opponent better, or more precisely, you need to find out what kind of character he has. And considering he hired people to eliminate your friend, Danzo doesn't like to get his hands dirty. And that's a big problem because there's very little information about him, my acquaintance answered. I already know that. No matter how strong he is, I will still fight with the intention of winning. But what worries me more is that he won't accept my challenge, and he has every reason to do so, Justin added. What kind of people are these? They don't know how to listen at all. I told you that you need to find out what kind of person this Danzo is. How do you think a man who doesn't like fighting managed to become the head of one of the most powerful clans in the conflict? The masked man said, handing over his phone. If a person with a petty nature behaves greedily, he will eventually go beyond the limits and break, the stranger added, chuckling. At first glance, there was no useful information on the phone, when suddenly Justin saw something interesting, after which he shouted in surprise, "What? He did this?" "I think this is suitable bait, don't you?" asked the stranger. "You're right. If this is what you say, you've convinced me. In that case, I only have to worry about Irina succeeding," Justin said thoughtfully. "What? Are you worried about Irina?" the masked guy asked, surprised. "Well, yeah, her opponent is a former A-rank fighter," the Meteor replied, perplexed. "But why am I surprised?" "The newcomers haven't seen her in battle," the stranger replied. "Meanwhile, we are returning to the Coliseum arena, where the duel between Inomu and Irin has already reached its logical conclusion. And to the surprise of many, the guy from the Black Mamba lost. The girl, in just a few minutes, turned him from a formidable fighter into a barely breathing piece of meat. Sponsors have already dubbed Irina the second monster that Steve raised. The girl had a very unique fighting style. She didn't invent anything new. She just successfully combined and applied techniques from various martial arts, which eventually developed into her own style. Morticia and Eric watched her fight closely. Even they, who knew Irina well enough, found it difficult to predict her actions. However, watching her dodge attacks and lure her opponent into a trap was simply amazing. Irina fought at the level of top-division fighters. Her speed, reactions, and striking power were not inferior to any of the leaders of the Great Four. For those who had seen Irina in battle before, the outcome of their duel was obvious. But for Eric and Morticia, it was a revelation. What's more important is that with her victory, the girl inspired the guys to train even harder. Morticia noticed that the girl often used kicks in battle, but only she was capable of that. The thing is, kicking puts you in a very vulnerable position in front of your opponent, but Irina has a natural flexibility that allows her to do it with minimal risk. When suddenly Steve said, "Eric, do you understand what this victory means? We can begin!" And we are transported to the office of the former representative of the National Alliance, Jimin. "I'm pleased. Danzo, our collaboration has borne fruit," Jimin said joyfully. "Of course, I always do everything conscientiously, especially when it comes to business," Danzo replied. Jimin was only worried about keeping their affairs a secret, but only a few people found out about their common interests. but Danzo assured them that there was no need to worry. I know I shouldn't worry because since then you have different interests. Foxy is happy to be helping Tavon, and Orca hasn't been interested in the Colosseum from the start. I'm glad you were smarter than all of them and came up with the idea of using abuse to make money, Jimin added, laughing. Of course I couldn't let Steve's betrayal go unnoticed. I think he's still angry that we joined the alliance, Danzo replied. Steve, I feel sorry for him. He's a capable guy, but I enjoy watching him suffer. However, recently he has started to act more actively. Are you sure you have covered all your tracks? Jimin asked worriedly. Calm down, there's nothing much to hide. No matter how high his fighters get, we still won't fight them. Besides, Tavon wants to block their access to the challenge, Danzo replied with a smile. This is why I love working with you. You thought of everything before any problems arose. By the way, it turns out I didn't tell you about this. Danzo, I'm going to give you a little push, so please tense up a little. Right now, you're just a promising high school student, but who knows? Maybe you'll be able to become the chairman of the Colosseum, after graduation, of course, Jimin whispered with a sly smile. That was the end of their conversation. As you've already realized, Danzo is just a puppet in Jimin's hands. However, for the wolf, this had its own benefits, so he worked tirelessly. After talking with Jimin, Danzo's men approached him with some kind of package. After unpacking it, the guy saw a small handwritten note. After reading it, cold sweat appeared on Danzo's face and his hands began to tremble, after which he began to look around fearfully, as if he was looking for someone. Hey, did anyone see this? Danzo asked, his voice trembling. No, Captain, but it just came. Captain, are you okay? Someone asked us funny. What he saw in the letter made Danzo connect to the secret server. Seeing a stranger in front of him, the guy went into a rage. He literally spat foam with anger. Hey, bastard, who are you that you know so much about me? Danzo shouted. You are a strange person. Even in such a situation, you allow yourself to talk like that. Do you even imagine what will happen to you if everyone finds out about this? Although I have to give you credit, you carefully covered all your tracks, but I still saw you. The masked guy we already knew answered in a squeaky voice. Now, what Danzo wanted to know most was how someone found out about his affairs. But then his fierce cry changed to surprise. After all, the stranger took off his mask, and the person hiding under it turned out to be well known to him. And it was Justin! This is the first time the guys meet face to face, although they know almost everything about each other. And now the most interesting part begins. Danzo received an official invitation to the duel from Justin. After Arena's victory today, Underdog became an official clan, and its members have the right to challenge any representatives of other clans. Thanks to the incriminating evidence, Danzo had no choice but to accept the challenge. At least Justin thought so. When suddenly the wolf said, "Who will believe you? You're just another fighter from a small clan. You are a fool. After I leave here, I will find you and send you after your friend, and then I will find the traitor." She's impressed. It turns out you know how to use your brain. But it's too late. Now we'll have some fun. Interrupting Danzo, said Justin, after which the arena began to change abruptly, and the voice of an orc was heard from afar. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Colosseum. Let me introduce you to our participants today. The head of one of the 4 great clans, the Wolf, the irresistible Danzo. What a sensation! We haven't seen Danzo in the arena for over a year. News of this fight quickly spread across the internet, so the number of viewers quickly broke the record. Everyone was eager to see what the head of one of the 4 great clans was capable of. Upon learning of this, Foxy became very wary. After all, I knew that Danzo would never fight just like that, which means something forced him to do this. What can I say? Even his participation in the battle was a real surprise for him. What made the situation even worse was that all the VIP guests had gathered to watch this fight. Realizing that his entire future would depend on this fight, Danzo froze in horror. Justin acted very cleverly. He issued a challenge that cannot be rejected, the so-called fight of honor. In any case, Danzo is now in a very dangerous situation, since nothing is stopping Meteor from exposing his fake fights. And if this comes to light, and God forbid one of the VIP guests loses money because of this, Danzo will simply be killed. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the Underdog clan, after her fight, Arena expected to be greeted with a smile and congratulations. But instead, she saw sullen and worried faces, and realized that something unusual was happening. Coming closer, the girl said, "Steve, did everything happen as you expected?" "Yes, they've already chosen a card," the guy answered. The map for the duel between Justin and Danzo was called Valley of Tears. It was a unique map, consisting of straight lines and very simple rules. If you touch the wall from both sides, the enemy's health will decrease, and when the indicators reach 0, he will lose. Valley of Tears is a basic map where you lose if you are completely outmatched by your opponent. Morticia. The choice of this card seemed strange because Heavenly Coliseum was more suitable. Irina suggested that Justin chose this particular map because there's no time limit. After all, in Celestial Coliseum, if there's no winner after 15 minutes, the match ends in a draw. If time is exceeded, there's a system called Gain Territory, which determines the winner. If you're outgunned by your opponent's strength, your territory shrinks, and you ultimately lose. Moreover, Valley of Tears is an ideal map for close combat. There is nowhere to hide or room to maneuver. It was for this reason that Steve was against Justin choosing her, because Danzo is a very strong, close combat opponent. But Meteor did not listen to him. However, he uses a lot of space to create his devastating combos, so overall this card limits both of them. During the conversation, Eric noticed that Steve and Arin were discussing their fight as if they knew Danzo personally. And the guy's plan to destroy the Colosseum only confirmed this. Our hero became interested in what united them. "And we will return back to the Colosseum. Danzo, what do you think of this map?" "I think it's perfect for us because no one can escape here," Justin said aggressively. "Honestly, I'm surprised by your confidence, but it looks like Steve hasn't told you anything about me," Danzo replied, laughing. After which, the guy bent over and leaned on his legs as if he felt ill. But this was only the wolf preparing for battle. At that moment, Justin felt that something had changed. The air in the arena became somehow heavy, and Danzo's whole body was covered with veins, as if something was about to tear him apart. What he saw made Justin realize that their fight would be much more difficult than he had expected, and his maddened eyes instilled horror. But the guy was not going to retreat. He was ready to give everything for the sake of revenge. As soon as the gong sounded, Danzo, without a second's hesitation, went on the attack. He was never known for his speed, but even for a meteor, he was incredibly fast. At the last moment, Justin miraculously managed to put up a block. He understood that if this blow had hit the target, the fight would have been over. But that's not the end. The explosive force of the blow was so great that Danzo knocked Meteor off his feet, and with all his might slammed him into the floor. It looks like this fight won't last long. Well, for now, let's go back to the hospital. Through his men, the masked man was going to deliver the letter to Danzo, but warned that the wolf would immediately start looking for the sender. But this is exactly what Justin was counting on, so he wanted to prepare a few surprises in advance. Moreover, if we are to believe the stranger's words, he wanted Danzo to lose no less than Justin himself. Therefore, Meteor didn't care who he was and what he really wanted, as long as he helped him take revenge. It even got to the point that the guy offered several interesting cards to choose from. However, Justin rejected all his proposals because he had long ago decided on the arena for their battle. "I see, you still chose her, even though Steve tried to talk you out of it," the stranger said unexpectedly. "The choice is yours, of course, but remember that everything depends on this battle," the guy added. "Stop lecturing, I know. I'm tired of you and Steve talking to me like I'm a little kid and don't understand anything. Your manner of speech suggests a lack of confidence in me if I choose this card. But I've already made up my mind," Justin added nervously. "You're quite the formidable guy, I like you. If you've decided, go for it," the guy replied, laughing. And we return to the arena, where Danzo has completely seized the initiative. Fear and anger turned him into a mad killing machine. After he managed to knock Justin to the floor, he sat on top of him and began delivering powerful elbow strikes. A huge amount of experience in MMA fights was evident. Despite the fact that Justin was successfully blocking all of his punches so far, the guy felt his opponent's fists getting heavier and heavier. You don't have to be a clairvoyant to understand that this will end badly. So the meteor began to think about how to get out of this grip, when suddenly Danzo made an incredibly powerful swing, preparing to deliver the decisive blow. Realizing that he needed to act immediately, Justin began to improvise, and quite successfully, The wolf missed. Taking the enemy by surprise, the meteor delivered several powerful blows to the chest to knock out his breath, which forced Danzo to retreat. Justin saw this as the perfect opportunity to counterattack. For many months, the boy trained a special combination with which he planned to deal with the wolf. But it's not that simple. As soon as he got to his feet, Danzo immediately flew into him using the technique Arcane! With this blow, the enemy receives multiple injuries to internal organs and most often breaks a couple of ribs. Realizing that they wanted to throw him to the floor again, Justin shouted, "I won't fall for the same trick twice!" After which he independently increased the amplitude of the jump, causing Danzo to fly over him and hit his head. But not a second had passed before he was able to get to his feet. It's surprising that with such strength and skill, he doesn't like to fight. And it's worth noting that Justin still hasn't landed a single punch on him. Feeling his absolute superiority, Danzo continued to attack. And the meteor had no choice but to block all of his attacks, since the card does not allow the use of its main advantage, speed. As for speed, Justin was already used to it, so blocking them was quite easy. The problem was that Danzo had incredible explosive power, and in the end, his arms might not be able to withstand such an onslaught. But then the wolf suddenly changed his tactics. After another blocked blow, he did not throw Justin to the floor, but grabbed him by the arm. And with all his might, he typed at the wall. And at that very second, Meteor's health points began to decrease sharply. The guy hoped that his opponent didn't know about this rule. But no. He not only knows about it, but also knows how to speed up this effect. Having broken Justin, Danzo pressed him even harder into the wall and began to run along it. Thus, the enemy's life decreases many times faster. At that moment, the meteor regretted not listening to Steve and choosing this card. But he was not going to give up. Having broken his shoulder joint, the guy was able to escape from the hold, which the wolf clearly didn't count on, and Justin was finally able to begin his attack. Unfortunately, Danzo was quite good at defense and was able to block the blow. However, this attack cannot be called a complete failure. The guy was able to restore the distance between them and take a short break for himself. Although, let's be honest, it didn't change anything fundamentally. Yes, Justin showed that he can also swing his fists, but Danzo still has the advantage. Are you really Steve's student? Either you're a loser or he's gone downhill. You have potential, but challenging me was foolish, the wolf said confidently. What does Steve have to do with this? Why did you even think about him? Justin asked, surprised. It's funny that you still don't understand. You should have gotten to know me a little better before coming here. Now, Steve is something of a jester and is the master of a worthless clan. And here's a secret for you. He raised me, Foxy, Orc, and Tavan, the masters of the Great Flower. He was our mentor, and what's most interesting is that he founded the Colosseum. Yes, you heard it correctly. I understand your surprise, but your mentor created all of this, Danzo shouted, laughing. Justin froze at what he heard, with bewilderment on his face. But remembering his true purpose, he said indifferently, "So what? It doesn't matter whether this has anything to do with Steve. He's probably doing this because he knows something is wrong here. He wants good guys to stay away from bastards like you," the meteor shouted angrily. Because of all this talk, Justin let his guard down, and Danzo took advantage of this to attack. And again a block, but the blows became even heavier. The biggest problem was that the wolf was constantly changing his attack tactics, and it was very difficult to predict his next move. This time he didn't knock the guy to the floor or throw him against the wall, but grabbed him to deliver several powerful kicks. This was enough to bring the meteor to the verge of losing consciousness, when suddenly Danzo grabbed him by the neck and squeezed tightly. Looking at his bleeding opponent, he said, "It's a shame that Steve has to work with such scum. You know, it was he who discovered my talent and developed it to its full potential. You felt that explosive power. Perhaps you too could have become like me someday, but you lack the talent. And now you have no future," Danzo shouted through a terrible laugh. "You shouldn't be groveling in front of me. I realized a long time ago that I have no talent," Justin whispered. "Remember I said that Scott was involved in wrestling, so that's where he met Justin. Meteor was always very good, which is why he was very self-confident. But one day, a talented newcomer came to them and quickly overtook him, and it so happened that they became best friends. When suddenly Danzo said, "It's clear that knowing that you have no talent, you went out to fight. Is it really all about that brat? Apparently, you were good friends with him. Don't worry, you'll see him soon, the wolf added, dragging the boy by the throat to the wall. Underdog, in full force, watched everything live, and only Arena had the courage to say that this was the end. Eric and Morticia agreed with her, although they didn't want to believe it. And only Steve was sure that this was not all, that Justin had prepared something special. Gritting his teeth in pain, the guy whispered something very quietly. "What, you still want to bark?" Danzo asked arrogantly. "How can someone like you know anything about talent? You're just trash, just like me. That's why you do all this. Money, business, and black schemes. You're not doing this because you want to, are you? You are the same as me. You felt this gap between you, so you ran away. Here, why are you acting like a rat? Do you really like being in Tavon's shadow?" Justin said, laughing. "You don't know anything about me, shut up," Danzo whispered in a dark voice. A masked stranger told the boy about this vulnerable spot of the wolf, but he didn't even suspect that it would have such an effect. Throughout his career, Danzo had been considered a non-entity among talents, so Justin's words infuriated him. Because of his anger, the wolf lost control of himself, and the meteor took advantage of this. And this time, the counterattack was successful. Justin's leg knocked out Danzo's jaw. Meteor understood that this was his chance. After a successful counterattack, he continued to deliver blow after blow. But Danzo turned out to be a very strong guy, so Justin's attacks practically did not hurt him. However, it was clear that things had become more difficult for him. Suddenly, she started doing something with her gloves, and Justin noticed it. The guy was confused because the rules strictly forbade increasing one's strength through outside means. But knowing Danzo, one can expect even this from him. "Hey, Pole, you've really angered me and you'll pay for it with your head," Danzo shouted angrily. After which, with incredible speed, he began to run towards Justin, and the meteor simply stood there as if it had already resigned itself to what was about to happen. But he just remembered his first training session with Steve, where the guy once again proved that Justin did not have any outstanding talent and suggested that he give up his goal. However, looking into the guy's eyes, Steve changed his mind. He saw himself in him, a guy who wants to achieve his goal no matter what it costs him. And that day he came up with a special strategy for Justin. Meteor had a tendency to lose control when he matched his opponent's tempo. The essence of the method developed by Steve was that Justin constantly kept his emotions under control and did not allow the enemy to impose his own rhythm of the fight. And to the guy's credit, it worked. At the right moment, the guy was able to control his emotions and calmly counterattack the Aiken Danzo. And at that moment, something happened. Something amazing. Many would call it a miracle. Scott, for whom Justin had gone all this way, finally came out of his coma. Controlling your own emotions is not the only thing Steve taught the guy. The clan master created a special combination based on Eric's fighting style, which he taught to all members of the clan and called Flash Underdog. It was precisely this combination that Justin was betting on. But that's not the most interesting part. The overtime moment has arrived, and the map has switched to territory capture mode. And now Meteor has an absolute advantage. He has captured almost the entire part of the Danzo map. However, the Underflash dog had a drawback. Because of the many alternating beats, it consumed a lot of energy, and not every heart could cope with such a load. And Justin felt his body on edge. His heart was beating approximately 270 times per minute, which was much higher than normal. And despite this, Meteor could not be stopped. He continued to strike blow after blow, only thanks to the power of will. Danzo understood perfectly well that if everything continued like this, he would lose. And in an attempt to stop Justin, he began to wave his fists. And one of the blows was still able to stop the guy and stop the combination for a second. And even despite this, Justin quickly came to his senses and was ready to deliver the decisive blow he had been striving for so long. Watching this, the sponsors, and in particular those in Jimin, froze in anticipation. Even Foxy, who had been indifferent to everything, was scared. But at the last moment, Justin stopped his fist, only slightly touching Danzo. Felt absolutely no pain, Danzo started laughing. After which he said, "Just look at yourself, you are pathetic. Have you really used up all your strength? I'll be honest, you were close, but this is your end." But it was all much more interesting. Justin deliberately held back his last blow. The thing is, he already knew he'd won, and he wanted to savor the moment. Letting his opponent think he'd won, the guy simply pushed him. The meteor did everything possible to ensure the wolf's defeat. The wolf, without even noticing, retreated too far, and the last push made him touch the wall. That was the end of their fight. In overtime, the slightest touch of the wall is considered a loss. All the spectators and sponsors who saw this were shocked. The absolute favorite lost, and Foxy was truly terrified. After all, Danzo's loss meant they were all in danger. In the future, this fight will be called the beginning of the end. Meanwhile, at the underdog headquarters, everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. The only thing that was unclear was Steve's reaction. He should have been happy about Justin's victory, but there was absolutely no emotion on his face. Due to Danzo's loss, many VIP guests lost a lot of money. But all this seems like a small thing compared to what Jimin lost. Now his entire illegal business and reputation are under threat, and therefore, his life. Despite the victory, Justin tried with all his might not to lose consciousness. With the underdog flash, the guy brought himself to a critical state, but it brought the desired result. Danzo from the Wolf clan. Now his reputation and clan have lost their positions. However, the guy wasn't going to just put up with it. He wanted to finish off Justin simply out of anger, but it wouldn't have produced any results. But at that moment, another person appeared in the arena and stopped Danzo. "Is that you? Why are you here? Have you come to talk some sense into me? You know what they'll do to us, right? It'll be the end for us all." "Get away, Orca, and I will destroy him," Danzo shouted, unable to contain his anger. "Calm down, the fight is over anyway. Beating him up will only make things worse," the orc replied. A real scandal broke out between the guys when suddenly Danzo said, "You don't understand. He knows our secret." Squeezing the wolf's fist with all his might, the calm and composed Orca shouted, "Whose secret? Ours? Don't drag me into your dirty business. This concerns only you. My advice to you is to finally accept this bitter truth. You, Danzo, the head of the Wolf clan, just left the Colosseum." Immediately after these words of the orc, Danzo was forcibly disconnected from the servers, and his avatar melted into thin air. But before that, Danzo managed to say that he would find Orca and talk to him. After it was finally all over, Justin returned to reality, and he felt pretty lousy, as if he had been run over by a truck. There are no pain limits at all in the Colosseum, so everything felt real. When suddenly the guy heard a familiar voice. "Hi, Justin." Looking up, he saw Scott, who had come out of his coma. This news shocked him so much that his body stopped obeying him. Meanwhile, Steve handed Arena a small flash drive and asked her to pass it on to the guys from the slums. Handing it to the guy, he said, "We also have to finish this game." The news that the leader of the Great Four clan had lost to a little-known newcomer quickly spread. This battle became a hot topic of discussion, not only on Fava TV, but also among all the participants of Re-APL. So, while everyone was discussing Danzo, there was cause for rumors. At that moment, the Underdog clan revealed a story to the online community. Danzo of the Wolf clan was involved in staged fights. The posts that appeared with evidence alarmed the community. Even news outlets that usually forbid publication of such things have started publishing articles about it. In the end, due to the Underdog clan, the falsification was confirmed. After which, Fafa TV faced the greatest crisis. Despite Danzo's careful attempts to cover his tracks, the evidence was overwhelming, and he became an unwanted person, and his clan was disbanded. But the most serious consequence was that almost all sponsors and VIP guests left the Colosseum. And all these problems fell on Tavan's head. The guy was asked around the clock for answers and a plan for further action. And all this thanks to Steve and his team, which recently added another member. For now, his identity will remain a secret. I can say that he is involved in all sorts of shady dealings. He used politeness to shut Anthony and Kabi's mouths so that they wouldn't dare reveal the Berserker's true identity. After all, after what happened, other clan masters from the Great Four, or more precisely the Great Three, will want to eliminate Underdog. In general, Steve still had a lot of worries. However, now, in the middle of the night, he came to meet Justin and Eric. It was no coincidence that the guys scheduled this meeting so late. The first thing Justin did was thank the guy for his help, after which he said, "I have a few questions for you. How did you create the collisions? And what is your relationship with the Masters?" "What are you talking about? The creator of the Colosseum? Eric asked, surprised. At that moment, Irina came out of the darkness with a haughty smile on her face. Realizing he had no choice, Steve replied, "Technically, you're right. I created the Colosseum. However, it's not that simple. And the rules as they are now were also created by me. But this happened by accident, although it would be more correct to say that they became like this because it was taken away from me." Not understanding what he was talking about, the guys shouted out in surprise, "What do you mean?" 2 years ago, when the hooligan alliances were very militant, at a time when everyone was busy expanding their sphere of influence, no one dared enter the Kanbuk district. And the reason was that it was mortally dangerous. This area was controlled by a group of monsters who opposed the alliances of hooligans. It included Danzo, Foxy, and Tavan. And the most interesting thing is that Steve was leading this group. No group of hooligans dared to enter the Kanbuk area. From time to time, you had some daredevils who invaded their zone. One of them was Jimin, but all their attempts to take over the area ended the same way. Jimin and his men were losing, but Steve and the team were tired of her constantly intruding into their area. Jimin constantly tried to negotiate with the Gangbuk district, but was always refused by Steve. Once the guy even tried to bribe them to gain influence in the area, but to no avail. Steve was always a guy with principles and rules, so it was impossible to bribe him with money. At that moment, the guy considered Tavan, Foxy, and Danzo his family, just as he considers the guys now. Back then, Steve trained them to fight off the gang of bullies who constantly interfered in their affairs. After hearing this story, Eric heard nothing that could lead to what is happening today. But the reality is this, which means something came between the Kanbuk team. Just at that time, a new technology of virtual reality appeared in the world. By that point, everyone on the team had a dream and a goal except Steve, and Reapel became a new dream for him. Or rather, he dreamed of creating an arena where everyone could compete without causing real harm to each other. And that is how the Colosseum came into being. When suddenly Justin said, "But how was it? Because you didn't even have any skills in games." And then Steve replied, "The thing is, the idea of the Colosseum and its creation was mine, but I wasn't the one who finished the game. I was too careless. I was so carried away by my dream that I didn't notice how the predators began to bite through the chains." Well, more on that later. Steve shared his idea with the whole team, and it must be said that at first the team was quite skeptical about this idea. However, Steve was able to convince them, saying that this way they would be able to deal with the Seoul Alliance and Jimin, and that's what eventually happened. However, having lost their common enemy, the Kanbuk team gradually began to crumble. Everyone had their own ambitions and goals, and they didn't coincide with Steve's goals. And we are temporarily transported to reality, to the headquarters of Tavan, where the leaders of the Big Four usually gather. After his loss, Danzo came here to settle some matters. Seeing that Orc was not there, the guy thought that now was the perfect moment. But before he said anything, he put 10 million on the table. The guy thought that this money could be a good argument for his proposal. Seeing Foxy's puzzled expression, Danzo said, "I've spoken with the Alliance. They're proposing to work together for mutual benefit." Before you say anything, think about it. Lately, the Alliance has had no reason to bother us, and cooperation is beneficial for everyone. We originally came here because he said he would train us, so now we have no reason to stay here, right? We are not the same children as before. It's time for us to think about the future. I see, so what are you going to do? Foxy asked, brazenly interrupting the guy. What do you mean, join the Alliance? Danzo answered, perplexed. Listen, I'm just as unhappy with the current situation as you are, but if we join the Alliance, things will be pretty lousy there too, Foxy replied thoughtfully. This was exactly the reaction Danzo expected. Taking something else out of his pocket, the guy said, "Don't worry. I already told you that I talked to them." Taking a closer look at the virtual reality glasses that Danzo had just taken out, Foxy asked in surprise, "Is this Steve's?" "No, sister, this is our new world," the boy answered, laughing. And we returned to the Underdog clan, where Steve told the whole truth. In general, this whole story with the Colosseum and the battles got into his head, and he didn't notice how he was betrayed. This was a real blow for the guy because he was betrayed by the people closest to him. After many disagreements, Tavan stole Steve's development and gave it to the Alliance. After which, the very same Colosseum that everyone knows appeared, and soon Fafa TV was created, which began to generate profit. That's where it all ended. Jimin gained full control of the Coliseum, and Tavan, Foxy, and Donzo, with Orca, gained independence. And Steve went from being an influential district leader to being nobody. Of course, the guy couldn't leave the betrayal unpunished. He wanted to destroy them all and take the Coliseum back. Jimin understood perfectly well that he and his alliance could do nothing against Steve. So he tasked Tavan with dealing with the former captain in honor of their new alliance. And Steve would have won that fight if Foxy and Danzo hadn't intervened. After that incident, the guy made a pact with himself that he would never get involved with them again. Here's the whole truth about the Coliseum and the Great Four. After Steve told everything, Arena, who had heard this story many times, said, "All this is in the past. And let's not forget that each of us is here for our own purposes. Some may have already achieved theirs, but since there is still a lot left, I believe that everyone will understand." Steve's story and feelings were familiar to Eric, so he understood him like no one else. He felt the same pain when his entire team betrayed him and left him with nothing. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Foxy met up with an old friend. "Orca, it's been a while," the girl said happily. Taking a closer look, Foxy added, "I see you have the uninvited guest with you. Foxy, meet Morticia from the Underdog clan," the orc replied joyfully. Tension quickly arose between the girls. They did not hide their hostility towards each other. At that moment, Foxy had only one thought. Orca had betrayed them and joined Steve and the Underdog clan. But right now, she was more concerned about why he'd brought Morticia along. She didn't look like someone who was ready for a fight, when suddenly the Mexican woman said, "Why do you have that expression on your face? Everything is cramped and tense, as if you really need to go to the toilet. Did something happen?" "But it really did happen. Everything you spent so long building has collapsed," the mortician added with a smile. "Listen up. If you say another word about my address, I'll finish you off," Foxy screamed angrily. "Excellent!" the Morticia shouted, throwing something to the girl. That item was the re-apple glasses, after which the Mexican woman added, "I understand your anger. When this happens, it's unpleasant. I hope your words were not an empty threat, and we can solve everything by force." "You're either crazy or stupid to challenge me to a fight," Foxy replied confidently. Sometime later, Orca entered Tavan's office. "I haven't seen you for a long time. I'm surprised you came," Tavan whispered, turning around. "I couldn't stand in the shadows all the time after what happened. I must admit I admire you. I thought it would be impossible to resolve the issue with the VIP guests, but you did it," the orc replied. "It's not all rosy. I closed Fafa TV," Tavan added indifferently. "What? What will happen to the Coliseum then?" the orc shouted in a surprised voice. "Since when did you start caring about collisions, Orca? Chairman Jimin was in charge of managing this company anyway. So I promised to hand over everything except the game." After that, he took up mediation. And it so happened that the incident had nothing to do with us. It all ended with the mistake being recognized as Danzo's willful actions. He seems to really regret not being able to take the Coliseum, but apparently he didn't think there was a good enough reason to take her, so he didn't even mention it, Tavan replied thoughtfully. "I see, but what happened to Danzo?" the orc asked. A little surprised, Tavan replied, "You know everything perfectly well. Do you want details?" "Well, you know, I'm not really into all this, and I don't talk to you three that often," the orc replied, giggling. "Of course you don't love us. So that's why you joined Steve and his dogs and betrayed us? Did you think I wouldn't understand that it was you who leaked Danzo's ledger, which only we knew about?" Tavan shouted in anger. "Betrayal? Don't you think that word carries a lot more weight than everyone thinks? Call me a traitor. It makes it look like I'm the bad guy in this story. After all, I told you back then that I wasn't interested in all this and you misunderstood me," the orc replied indignantly. "However, even though you knew that we would betray Steve, you didn't tell him anything. And on that day, I also just watched him get it," Dumchala added to Vaughn. "I never thought you were smart, but now you simply amaze me. Like you, I had my own goals. I don't like the Coliseum, and that's true. But I was interested to watch how it develops and in what direction it is moving. However, the future that we created, although no, you created, it was just a boring game imitating adults. I was disappointed. You've turned the Coliseum into something terrible that has lost all meaning. We need to bring the game back, Tavan," the orc said in a serious voice. sitting down on the table and looking the guy straight in the eyes. "I don't understand your goals, but it looks like you're going to hinder me," Tavan added in a calm but rough voice, when suddenly the door to the office opened and Foxy's voice was heard. "Are you finished talking?" "I'm done." Turning around, Orca saw Foxy filled with strength and quite smug, although he had foreseen such an outcome of their duel. But he still hoped that the Mexican woman would be able to overcome the poisonous snake. "Morticia lost. Let's go, I have nothing more to talk about with him," Tavan said, ignoring the orc. Seeing that something was wrong with the guy, Foxy began to seriously worry. After which he said, "Hey, Orca, since we couldn't find a compromise, tell him that in a week I will send the code for Reaple, and if he wants something, then let him come and take it." After their conversation, Orca called Steve and told him everything. As strange as it may sound, Steve was expecting this. After losing to Donzo, Tavan could not remain inactive. However, right now, he was more interested in how Morticia was feeling. Despite the rather tough loss, the girl was fine. When suddenly Steve said, "Forgive me, I gave you an impossible task. Foxy is still fierce." "Cap, what are you saying?" "I wanted this fight too. Now I have a reason to get even with that bitch," the Morticia replied, laughing. "Besides, the fighting style is a little different from what you prepared me for." "I'll tell you everything when we meet," the girl added. Morticia's fighting spirit gave Steve the hope he so desperately needed right now. But the image of that same invincible Canbook team still comes to mind, who simply took it and exchanged it for money. And the only thing Steve wanted was revenge. The guy believed that this long story would soon end, and everyone will get what they want or deserve. Meanwhile, Mark and his friend from school went to play at the computer club. Overall, the boys enjoyed playing on the computer, but they wanted to immerse themselves in virtual reality. When suddenly Mark said, "Listen, if you want to so much, why don't we play at home?" Because of the scandal surrounding Fafa TV, many people began comparing virtual reality to gambling. "And my parents don't let me play anymore," my friend replied indignantly. "Unfortunately, I have to end this story at this point. Thank you all for watching, and I look forward to your thoughts in the comments."